No.
Anybody from the sheriff's office here?
A couple deputies in the park.
I'd say my suggestion would be leave them on and if they come in.
Well, I was gonna move it up for them.
You can't move it up if they don't come in the building.
You want me to go grab them?
Maybe they're waiting for somebody to show up.
Well, we'll move it up a little bit, how about that? Well, I was gonna move it all the way to the beginning, but, I'm gonna move it up to, item number 8. What do we move that on, quickly get in here?
Move everything else down.
Yeah. And,
So you're going to place it between 7 and 8?
sure,
Okay.
just to get them back to their duties a little faster. Anyone else have any additions, solutions, or changes?
Motion to approve as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor? And, I will consider approval of the consent agenda tonight.
So motion as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor? That brings us to the finance officer report.
All right, let's see here. Okay, the January financial statements are what we're looking at tonight. And during the month, I made a budget amendment. I moved 1,000 from Park and Rec event services and moved 500 into Park and Rec pond maintenance and 500 into the repair service account.
Sure, I noticed on here you've got one entry for a refund from tree service. Is that for work that was done in the park or was that for the urban forester?
Where is that, Mike?
On the custom transactions details report, dated January 26th.
Is that the refund of Central's application?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. What page is it on?
Page 1.
Page 1, okay. Yeah, that would be the refund of the deposit and the fee from Centrella, who had applied for a CUP, but it was determined that the application was not complete.
That's not what I thought. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. So, back to the revenues and expenditures. We're at 94% of property tax collected. We received 100% of our CARES funding, and we spent 100% of our allotment. That's that part of it. Okay, now I have 2 other items. We have a bill for $800 for winterizing at the park, and I don't have enough money in the right accounts to pay for it. We can pay, we have $500 left in grounds, so I would need at least $300 more in there, and I don't know that I imagine there are going to be expenditures to unwinterize it in the spring.
Cheryl, how do you not budget for that? We do that every year.
I get Park and Rec's requests, and we all are at the budget hearings.
And John, since you're here, is there a separate fee? Where's John? Is there a separate fee for turning it back on in the spring versus just turning it off in the winter?
There usually is, yeah.
So we move $800 around.
Travel, there's usually a separate fee.
So we've not done winterization yet.
No, they wouldn't.
It's a good thing we did.
Yeah, because we had a pipe that's before, fortunately it was before the meter, not after the meter, because we'd already winterized the system.
That was the email I sent you last week with photographs. Anything from the meter into the park we're responsible for, but anything from the meter out in the road, they're responsible for.
Did that fix the water pipe?
No.
Did they fix what? The blacktop? No, they said that, I checked with Cheryl, we're going to leave it a couple of weeks, let it settle, and then come back and repair the blacktop.
Again, no cost to us.
Also asked, that's covered by DOT.
Union County.
water guys, yeah.
All right, so is there $300 anywhere
Well,
else?
well, we need 300, but we'll also, the next thing, we'll have the bill to unwinterize it, dewinterize it, whatever. So how much do you think that'll be, John?
It's not a lot, he just has to tighten the flanges, prime the pump, start the pump going again. I'd say 400, 500 bucks.
So we really need to move $800 into grounds.
Is there anywhere else it is?
We can move it from events.
Do that. Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion that we move $800 from events into grounds for the de-winterization and re-spring ready.
The winterization and the unwinterization of this water system.
So that's my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Cheryl, next item?
The other item I have is that we are going to be having a Board of Adjustment hearing, and for this hearing, we need, George is going to represent the zoning administrator, and we need an attorney to be hired to represent the Board of Adjustment. I contacted Ken Swain Law Firm, who, he does Board of Adjustments for Unionville and Stallings, and he said he could attend and he could do it, and his fee would be $175 an hour. I think we have adequate funds in legal expenses, but I just wanted to get council's approval.
Cheryl, why two lawyers? Don't we just take ours?
George can probably explain that better than
I
I.
mean, usually it would be a lawyer on our side and then a lawyer on the other side.
Well, not for contested hearings like that, because, the town through, Vaughn as a planner, needs some type of representation to kind of help assist with the presentation of the case. And then the Board of Adjustment needs an attorney too. So in theory, if the Board of Adjustment ruled in a certain way and one of the parties to that hearing wanted to appeal to the council, wanted to appeal, or the council wanted to appeal and to court, then someone would need to represent the town. And so, for example, if I were representing the Board of Adjustment in that hearing, then I couldn't then represent the town in the appeal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
There's some ethical wiggle room in North Carolina on how it can be manipulated, but that's the best way. That's the best way to handle it. It's clear then that there's differing responsibilities. So I'm sitting at the table with Vaughn as he's presenting the case and can assist as needed with that. And then there's no question that there's an appeal afterwards that I can be a representative of the village.
Cheryl, you said there's money in legal fees?
Yeah, there's money available. I just wanted authorization to have him do that work for us.
I don't think you need a motion, do you?
I think it would be nice.
All right, so motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
And that's all I have.
Got a question for Cheryl, yeah.
Sure.
Cheryl, whenever we put together the budget, right, last year, we were not sure what impact COVID was going to have on some of our shared revenues. And looking at those, it looks like we're tracking a little bit less than what we should be. Is that so, or am I?
No, I think, yeah, actually, we've done really well, and all those shared revenues, the sales tax ones, not the very first one, but the next four, we should be at 25%. And you can see the first one's 38%, 28%, 34%. The pipe natural gas is just weather dependent, and so after the winter, that will come up, so that's not really running low either. The sales and use tax, we've had October, November, December, January. We've had 4 months, so that we're at 45%, and only 4 months would be 33%, so we're running over. So we're doing fine.
Cheryl, one last question, and I don't know if you want to refer this to Parks and Rec discussion or deal with it now. The red tape with some of the billing on both the winterization and the playground benches, would you want to wait and discuss that with Parks and Rec?
What's the question?
Did we resolve the red tape issues with?
We've ordered the table. We have not yet ordered benches.
She hasn't gotten the number yet.
Okay, so we're still waiting on some state tax number?
Well, yeah, it depends who you buy from. The person we bought the table from is collecting the sales tax like they should. But the one that has the bench that we haven't ordered from, they won't charge us sales tax, which means we need to remit it to the state, but I have to have a number to remit it to the state, and I've applied for it, and I haven't heard from the state.
Well, we're talking about, what, $50?
Tax? 6.75% of whatever we spend. We're spending several $1,000s. I mean, if you want to take that risk that you can get audited, I don't personally want to take the risk of a penalty. So I'm just trying to protect y'all.
It just seemed like there was an awful lot of red tape in ordering some picnic tables and benches.
You gotta work that way.
And we're still dealing with that. Yes.
Yeah, I've applied. It's been a couple of weeks now.
All right. Thank you for
Alright, I'm trying to keep us, we have a really full agenda tonight. I'm trying to keep us current. Will somebody, a volunteer, step outside and tell Sheriff Kathy that we moved him up to item 7 and a half? Thank you, John. Alright, so now we're at the planning board report and any comments from our public.
Good evening. I was going to talk about what we covered in our last planning board about 2 weeks ago, January 26th. So starting off, we had Mr. Como and Mr. Boyce join us. So I want to appreciate you guys for coming in and sitting through our whole meeting. For instance, some of the things we discussed was when Mike and Amanda attended the Union County meeting about the application for county on Billy Howell Road. I think it's really valuable that you guys come and talk to us and tell us what's going on, what you guys are council doing, especially outside our borders. I think it's extremely valuable to keep that communication going. So one thing, that was really good. Of course, some other things we discussed with you guys was update on the tax reevaluation that's coming up. Really interesting. There are a lot of questions about that. I think we did good by working through it to help everyone understand what that means, which is what we all talked about here last month, the council meeting. So I think that went really well. Of course, Deb on the planning board, she's director of the communications committee, so we kind of handed off to her to figure out how to work and communicate that reevaluation with the town. All right, and then we went on to some new business. We had the Cavison final plot review. We actually discussed this quite at length. Eventually, we passed on the suggestion to approve the final plot. Actually, the vote was 3-2. There's a lot of concerns over, especially the entrance and exit of that. Granted, it was already approved that way in the preliminary plot. But if you guys recall, after this, we since updated our ordinance to say any subdivisions, I think a certain size, which would include this, requires more than one exit lane. And of course, if you remember Cavison, when we went through the preliminary plot, they said if we would have known that going into it, somehow you communicated to us that's what you wanted, we would have put that in. So we were left, going like, talking about this and saying, our ordinance now says you should have multiple exit lanes. In the preliminary plot, we proved it, but we also said that's what we really want. Is there any way to get that done? And some of us said, two of the 5 of us really had concern over that and did not approve that, voted against it because of that. Somehow they wanted to find a way to have more than one exit lane. So know that when you see it come through, that was a big concern and a big discussion point. The other part of that is there is some lots, buildable lots that are in flood zones or wetlands. And of course, we've since updated our ordinance to not allow that either. But again, all this was submitted prior to those. So you can't hold that against them. But those were some big discussion points. Does that make sense to you guys?
What was the timing on all of this from when they did the first review letter when we changed the ordinances?
I think it was 2008.
2019, planning board approved it, the preliminary plat in February of 2019, and then we made a modification to the major subdivision ordinance that was requiring 2 lanes, 2 exit lanes in June of that year.
So as majority, we still suggest that we approve it. I think, we discuss the risks to the town if you don't, to the village if you don't, so take that for what it's worth. We now have ordinances that would be, the subdivision would be different, because, came across our plate today. But that was just probably 45-minute discussion to do that.
And how do we close that gap so that doesn't happen again?
Well, we have, we're updating our subdivision ordinance.
No, the gap of somebody submitting something and the ordinance changing and then not.
There's statutory protection for changes in applicability of local regulations. So if you get to the point where you've submitted a complete application, basically it was called the Permit Choice Law 2019, which included some of the land use updates. But basically, they can, at their discretion, they can continue to use the previously applicable ordinances. If they ever lose their common law or statutory vested right during that, if they stop, just completely go away and come back 2 years later, they would have to abide by the new rules. But anybody that submits something before you change the ordinance, they get to operate under the.
Correct. I understand that, but what I'm saying is just as a courtesy of informing them of this change, to where in this case, if the contractor said, hey, we would have changed had we known earlier, just that opportunity to maybe get some of these things that are in process in line if they're going to work. That's what I was talking about.
We can always talk to folks. There's not a big stick that we have in that case.
Yeah, I realize that. It's just partnership.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on Jefferson? Discussion? Yes.
I do have one. Whenever planning board saw it on the preliminary plat stage, John, you had questioned the street light between lots 12 and 13 and about it causing an issue with the house behind it, the adjoining house. And one of the things that we put, me being a part of that planning board at that time, was a possible condition could be looked at again whenever the final plat was laid out. You guys discuss that with your review, or was it even brought up?
We did discuss lighting. I don't know if we ever, what we were told was it was going to be the same as what was approved in the preliminary plot. And changes to that were, again, not acceptable. Does that sound right, Bob? Because I know we brought up lighting.
TJ might want to address this during the actual consideration of it, but I believe y'all did submit a change to that street light.
So we'll circle back to one.
All right.
Anything else, John?
That's it on Jefferson. The other thing we discussed was RA40 rezoning discussion. So just like last month we talked about, we're starting to have some interest in people rezoning. Initially, when we talked to Braun about this, was let's get an ordinance in front of us. Once it's in front of us, let's start looking at how potentially to do a village-wide evaluation of potential rezoning of properties to RA40 to bring them into compliance, or to establish RA40 agricultural type districts, if you will. So we discussed this a lot, and what it could look like, what it would look like. Essentially, what we came out of it was for Vaughn to work on a procedure, to bring back a procedure to the planning board next month. So we could look at that and determine how do we evaluate this, how do we look at this holistically on the village of a rezoning. Or do we just wait and have individual applicants come through? And if we have individual applicants come through, there's another agenda item here. Is there any type of permit applications that we make it different permit applications? Maybe there's a more streamlined approach or reduced cost, or we're just going to see rezoning one after another for RA40s. That could take up a lot of time, a lot of resources for the village. We lump those together or streamline it. So essentially, we're going to move that to next month, or this month, and look at a procedure that follows.
And I'll just go ahead and say that I do have some concerns about RA40 rezonings without the owner requesting them. It would be a lot of time and money spent for public hearings and advertising and posting, and a lot of the planning board time. But I hope that council and planning board will agree that our biggest priority that we need to work on next is our conflict. So that's just my 2 cents.
I think that's a great thing. We should probably start adding to our agendas. Cheryl and Vaughn is, complimented. But revisiting our procedure, our strategy to go into that. And I'm going to start executing that today. We paused for probably about 6 months now. We can revisit that and adjust as needed.
And I did receive a quote from Benchmark, and I will talk to y'all about that in my job tomorrow. Because I want to give y'all time to carry it. Anything else, John?
Last thing was, Vaughn introduced us to his latest updates with NCGIS 160D. So again, there's multiple pages of rewording. The idea is that we can come back next month and review the next updated version. And I think our goal is to, what's our goal now? I mean, I was thinking it was in the next month or two to have to finalize.
Let's go Mark to make a recommendation.
Okay. And then last, survey results, right? That's one of the things we discussed with Mr. Como and Mr. Boyce. And I see that we have on our agenda in a couple of weeks here to specifically sit down and focus on those. So that's all we have.
Representatives from planning board for that?
I'm going to try and be there, and I'm not sure who else responded.
Everyone's was invited.
Okay.
So, and we'll talk about that agenda item number 11. We'll refer them to it. Thank you.
All right, and I don't have the agenda for this month. Was there anything that you guys noticed worth bringing up now?
I think we might not have anything big for us.
All right.
Vaughn, do you have any additional comments?
Just a couple notes. We've been reviewing a couple sections of Heritage Subdivision with Bonnie. Submitted some comments to their engineers, and they've gotten back a revision to that for the final plat to us. That probably will not be this month for the planning board, probably March for the planning board for Heritage. Carolina Pets, we've almost done with our second review of that up on the road here. A notable issue, and this is the second one that I've seen since I've been working with y'all, is a pretty interesting floodplain violation. So just for everyone's edification on the record, if you're in a flood, please check before you engage in any work. If you're anywhere near a stream, because you're very likely in a floodplain in Weston Chapel. We had somebody build essentially a bridge in the middle of the east fork of 12 Mile Creek using very large culverts and rock and stone and dirt. We've sent a letter to them. We have not heard back from them yet, so this might get interesting. But that's a very wide floodway through there, and it can certainly increase the area that floods upstream and around the 50 years, something like that. So,
Corps of Engineers are going to have an issue with that as well.
Bonnie had one of the construction inspectors go out there to observe it. I got a phone call about another matter. The gentleman lived beside there, and he happened to mention that his neighbor had built a bridge in the middle of the stream. And so I thought it was of great enough concern that the engineers should go out there and take a look at it. So they did. It's a bridge in the middle of the stream.
It's a big no-no.
Big.
John, you'll be here for the end of the meeting. Okay. I've got some updates from the county planning and zoning department, but I don't want to delay the meeting.
Okay.
Anything else, Vaughn?
That's it for now.
It goes right back to you for direction on the list of eligible projects for the 2015 metropolitan area.
All right. As we briefly discussed, and maybe some more via email than actually in meetings, the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization is in the early stages of developing the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This will be used by the region's transportation planners to advance projects to NCDOT for funding in the state's transportation improvement program. They have put out basically a call for projects from all of the member jurisdictions in CRTPO to submit candidate projects for consideration for prioritization in the 2050 MTP. Eligible projects are those that are on the adopted comprehensive transportation plan for the region. And unfortunately, I didn't know that the due date was going to be the 12th until we had our TCC meeting at the beginning of this month. So it's coming up fairly quickly. I sent you I've been in touch with the county about projects they were submitting, and they, at the time that I spoke to them and wrote this memo, they were only submitting the Marshall bypass. Warren emailed me late last week, and let me know that the county was also submitting the 84 from Airport Road back to Waxhaw Indian Trail Road, approximately a 3-mile section of 84, which would essentially connect, I guess, the 84 project in West and then all the way through to Monroe. So that would not be one that we would need to consider. I sent y'all some supplemental information, some resources about what to look at. I, not being as familiar, of course, with Wesley Chapel as y'all, we're looking for some direction from the council as to potential projects to submit. We had some email discussions about it, and I included some of the items that were brought up previously, and they provided with the TIP, TTP link, and the current NTP projects. And so really what we'd be doing would be submitting candidate segments of road on the CTP to CRTPO to run through their local prioritization process to determine their eligibility and ranking order for inclusion on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And so any direction you would like to give, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to submit them. The time is kind of short right now, unfortunately. And lots of jurisdictions are going to be submitting in the next few days, unfortunately, because everybody's council meetings are kind of lining up with the submission deadline. But any direction you'd like to give, I'd be happy to put in as many projects as feasible. There's no cost other than paying our fee to do that. So.
Is there any value to putting our 2 roundabouts in?
I think the intersection projects is more road segments that they're looking at instead of specific intersections. And so the intersections would be inclusive of those road segments.
Because I think the Potter 84 one is part of that.
It's on the TIP.
It would be part of the widening.
Well, how does council feel about trying to link the potential improvements at 84 and Potter and tying those in with the Potter and Potter intersection improvements? Instead of doing one and then doing the other, trying to put them together so they both get done at the same time.
He said it was more of a roadway application, not a intersection.
And
I don't know that that's possible because they're not widening that stretch.
so 84 and Potter is on the STIP for construction in fiscal year 2025. And the Potter Road, Wesley Chapel Road roundabout is construction in fiscal year 2022.
Well, it's all on the report you sent us.
What was that?
It's all on the report you sent us.
The dates?
Yes.
I don't think, I sent Cheryl some additional information on Thursday to Cindy that had the STIP documents attached.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
But I don't see those days on there.
You may have to actually look at the project on the website if you can't remember. I got to look it up and I got it.
So we don't really have any sections of roadway to submit.
I mean, it's great to have this stuff on a list, on a piece of paper, on a list somewhere, but DOT is so far behind in actually putting a shovel in the dirt, it's not funny. So,
But what other roads are there seriously that we would say we should do road widening on in the village?
I mean, if they get that 84 widening from the airport to Waxhaw Indian Trail, I mean, that would be a serious improvement for traffic. Till it bottlenecks here again.
I believe that the new Route 84 from Railroad to the current, I think it's funded in post years still, so that'd be 2029 plus for construction. And so a new segment from here to Airport Road would probably be mid 2030s that would be the horizon year, probably 2035 or 2045 for that. But it takes a very long time to get a project these days. They're in the process.
Takes a long time to do the ones that have already got approved and funded.
That's right.
This is why this is a 2050 plan.
Okay. And, yeah, we're talking about 2050 here, so.
Because I mean, there's already plans on roads about lighting, like the railroad.
People know
The
like
other
mentioned,
ones are water.
Okay. So council, we're in consensus, we don't have a stretch of road management from that.
not that's not already been submitted or discussed.
Good.
Good.
Well, thank you, Bob, for coming and trying this out. All right, so if somebody would like to go get Sheriff County. We have moved, for those of you who came in a little late, we moved up Sheriff County's presentation.
We're approaching in.
It's not working tonight, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're not going to work.
No.
I appreciate you letting us come and talk to you. It's been a good while since I've been here. When we moved through this pretty quick in the past, I wish we had our slides to show you. But the reason is, when Wesley Chapel started in 2012, we had one officer here. You think about how much Wesley Chapel has changed since 2012. We think it's time that the city council would look at adding on another officer or two. And we want to show you some comparisons to let you see how it's changed. Call numbers, what's going on in the past, and what's going on now. Chief Deputy Wood will go through these slides with you. You've got them enough for them? We got them under just related to Wesley Chapel, so. All right, well. How many do we need? If we hand these out, how many do we need? 5. Now, those slides are just specific to Wesley Chapel, but before we get into the Wesley Chapel piece, I'll give you an overview of just some general stats countywide, sort of what I like to call a report card, if you will, of what your sheriff's office has done and how we compare to other contract towns, as well as how we're doing on a national as well as a state level when it comes to solid crime. So, again, I told you I'm one of the 2 chief deputies at the Sheriff's Office and Local Operations. We have Chief Deputy Mel Miles, he's over the administration. We have Dottie Thomas, our business manager. We have Greg Thomas, captain of operations in the back. And then Lieutenant Brian Kazaya, who oversees our Special Operations Bureau, which our contract deputies answer directly to him. So we are proud of our relationships that we have with our municipalities. It's our goal to make sure we're giving the best law enforcement service that we possibly can. We do believe high visibility is probably the most biggest deterrent to crime. Being visible, being proactive, and we're going to show you what these numbers represent. So let me just kind of start here with an overview of the county. In 2020, the sheriff's office had, these numbers are so small these times I can't see them, but 120,000 patrol events countywide. Now, many of those patrol events are self-initiated. If you see on these specific graphs, there's color codes. The orange are self-initiated. What that means is proactive policing, seeing suspicious activity, stopping a car, stopping a person, preventive patrols, we call it, going through neighborhoods, checking residences, checking businesses after hours. That's preventive patrols or self-initiated patrols. The calls for service are those that are dispatched through 911. Anybody calls 911, they want an officer, whether it be an accident report, a crime that's already occurred, whatever it might be, those are captured under those calls for service. So you will see in 2020 alone, our calls for service, or our total events, was significantly increased, largely due to COVID-19. We had a lot more officers, SROs in particular, that were what we call force multipliers that were on the streets, because the schools were primarily closed during the last school year. So those officers that usually are in the schools were assisting and backing up other officers on the street. So that number is a good number, but it probably won't stay that way once schools get back in normal session.
I'm sorry, which numbers are you referencing? You said it was a significant increase in 2020?
Those would be the total patrol events. Probably what you're looking at, I'm not sure if you have that particular slide or not.
Because when I was looking at, it looks like 2019, 2020 are the same, so.
Okay. You may not have that.
Yeah, we don't have the total counties.
Okay. Because we were going to do this on the slide and we show you, but since we don't have a slide, so I can't show you all these. But I'll get it to you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide was the first dispatch, the first arrival on the scene. And you may not see it because I don't think you have that particular slide. But in 2020, our response time was reduced to 10.35 minutes. That's average response time. So that's down from 11.19 minutes in 2019. That's countywide of response from the first time that call is dispatched to the arrival of the first officer on the scene. So that's a number we're constantly trying to reduce and get that number lower and lower. But again, the closer you want to the call, the quicker that response time is going to be. Also, we talked about our crash statistics and how those matched up in 2020. We do have a large number of our patrol deputies are now trained to investigate traffic accidents. There's a reason for that. Sheriff Cathy is very supportive of that program, is to keep the roads clear, as opposed to waiting for a highway patrol to come and investigate a traffic accident. You may see an hour and a half wait. Roads are backing up, traffic is congested, people can't get where they need to go because they're having to wait for the roads to be cleared. So we continue to try to train more officers to handle as many traffic accident investigations as we can. And you'll see those numbers are increasing, the number of crash investigations that we're doing. We talk about our violent crimes. I mentioned this earlier. Union County has 99, little over 99 per 100,000 persons crimes, versus national level, I can't even see these numbers, but it's way over 250. And the state was even higher than that. So that's a number that we're very proud of. And it continues to come down each year, considering we back up to Charlotte. We're very proud of the fact our violent crime rate is very low, considering we have an increasing population. So there's a reason people want to move to Union County and live in Union County. Another stat is our property crime is also very low compared to national and state levels. And one thing we don't reference on here is our solvability rate. We have one of the highest solvability rates of reported crimes of anywhere in the state. So we got a great investigations bureau. We have great relationships with the community that helps us resolve these crimes. We also talk about our drug-related arrests. And this is something that the sheriff has been very supportive of is we got out ahead of as best we could this whole opioid epidemic that really spread across the country in 2015, 2016. We did a lot of very proactive drug enforcement work. We've been very aggressive with our drug investigators. And so we're starting to see a difference in the types of investigations our narcotics guys are working. The types of arrests they're making are significant. We're going after the mid-level and drug traffickers, not just the users, but we're trying to focus more on the mid-level traffickers and slow down the spread of this epidemic. So our drug arrests actually came down last year, 523 in 2020. That's a good thing. Here's why. Our drug investigators will tell you that frequently they hear from informants, and drug defendants who will tell them, I knew I should have come to Union County. The cartels are running these drug organizations, and they will tell them, don't go to Union County. They will put you in jail. That doesn't happen in some of our neighboring counties. So the fact that that number is actually lower is actually shows they're doing a good job. Our heroin deaths and overdoses. We did have, in the county, 12 heroin-related deaths in 2020. That number may go up. We're still waiting for some autopsy reports to come back and a few deaths that probably are going to be opioid-related. But then we responded to another 60 non-fatal heroin overdose cases in 2020. So there's still more work to be done. Some of you have probably heard, we're going to show you a picture of our firearms range. If you haven't been out there and seen it, we have a state-of-the-art firearms training facility just east of the sheriff's office. It's 100-yard fully baffled firearms training range. So we're continuing to build mobile classrooms, or actually provide mobile classroom space so we can do more firearms-related training and other classes at our training center. So we're going to show you pictures of that as well. Our mobile offices, we like to call them, we have pretty much now 3 different types of vehicles that our deputies are issued. There's two different types of SUVs, Dodge Durango, the Chevy Tahoe, and there's also pickup trucks. It's a bigger vehicle. We have more equipment that they're carrying now, and you will see these pictures. If we had the slideshow, we would have shown you what it looks like inside. Most of these deputies now, this also goes back to response times. We want them out in the street. The sheriff wants them out in their zones, their assigned areas, so they're not sitting in an office. This is their office. So they have computers, they have all the equipment they need, mobile phone, radio. Pretty much they work from that car. So all the things they need mostly to do their job is right there in their vehicles. We're also moving to an enhanced in-car camera system. This is something that's been a long time in the works, and a lot of discussions about body cameras and things like that. We finally identified through our in-car camera vendor we've been using for many years now. They actually now offer a body camera video system that's compatible, very cost-effective, that we're going to be able to integrate with an upgraded system, an in-car camera system, and body camera. So we're starting to roll those out over the next 3 or 4 years. We hope to have those out in all of our vehicles as well. All right. Now, I'll talk specifically about some of the contracts, which I think you may have that in front of you. If you will look at some of the other town contracts, for example, Indian Trail, the sheriff referenced, some of these other contracts we have. Indian Trail has currently 27 deputies that serve the town of Indian Trail. 1 captain, 1 lieutenant, 4 sergeants, and 21 other deputies. Weddington has 3 deputies. Marvin has 2. Lake Park has 2. And then if you look on another slide, hopefully you will look at the towns in Union County with police departments. you will see there the population of those towns, their annual operating budget, along with the number of officers that provide police services for those communities. We think we're doing pretty good. We think we're doing well. You're getting a lot for what you pay for. And if you look at that, on one of the slides where it says budgeting for future positions, in addition to that one deputy that you pay for, you also get all the other services that are provided by the Sheriff's Office. All of our detectives I've spoken about, our crime scene investigators, animal services response, our community services division, which includes our SROs, our civil division, support services, our SRT team, our tactical team, along with mobile field force. Hopefully they're not needed, but if they are needed, that's part of our larger Sheriff's Office as a whole. And then you have specific slides about Wesley Chapel Patrol events. And this is what I was talking about earlier, the total events, and these are specific to Wesley Chapel. You will see there were 1,778 dispatched calls for service in 2020 in Wesley Chapel. The Wesley Chapel deputy had 4,814 self-initiated calls in 2020. And then the next slide, you will see the car crashes. We've talked a little bit about that. Wesley Chapel car, our one unit here, our one deputy here investigated 42 inside of Wesley Chapel in 2020. And there were 120 total accidents that occurred in Wesley Chapel Township that were investigated by primarily the Sheriff's Office, sometimes Highway Patrol. One of the other things, and I'll quickly note this, is the Wesley Chapel first dispatch to first arrival. That's a really good number. When you look in the blue, in the 2020 graph, in the 2020 column, when you see the blue block, 5.48 minutes was the average response time for our one deputy assigned to Wesley Chapel. The next block behind it in orange is 8.41 minutes. That's for all the other units who responded to calls for service in Wesley Chapel when the deputy wasn't on duty. So you see it's almost a 3-minute increase when he's not here. And then if you look at the county-wide response time, the average was 10.35 minutes to all calls throughout Boone County. So those numbers sort of tell a story that having a deputy dedicated here is almost half the average response time in other parts of the county. And the last thing here is deals with the traffic accidents. If you look at the number of accidents that occurred in Wesley Chapel versus the other contract towns, there's a pretty high percentage. You got a lot of things going on out here, a lot of growth in this community. So that's just a very quick, brief overview of what we're doing in the Sheriff's Office. I apologize that I can't show you these in larger numbers because these numbers are very difficult to see. In my old age and my eyes are failing, so I look at some small numbers here. But I'll open it up. If you guys have any questions, you got several folks here that can answer these questions for you. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question about the statistics you shared. So
Yes,
you shared some countywide data.
Right.
Did that countywide data include the contributions from the town's police departments and the contract deputies? Or was that just Sheriff's Office excluding contract deputies and the town's police force? I'm trying to get when you say all county, trying to understand.
Do you remember which one specifically?
All of them, because I think the way you just talked about it in some, you said these are all countywide. So I'm just trying to understand, do the countywide numbers include all types of police forces in the county doing those, or
Right.
some segregation? That's all I'm trying to get at.
Sure. The response time, those are Sheriff's Office response times in the county. That does not count the Vauxhall Police Department. That would count municipalities, not the municipal contracts, I should say, not Waxhaw PD, not Monroe, not Stallings, Marshall, or Wayne. Yes, ma'am.
The $101,000 we pay a year, this year, that the vehicle is $62,800 and the deputy salary benefit is $104,000. So the entire $101,000 that we're spending goes to the deputy salary and benefit?
Great question. I knew you were going to ask that. Ms. Thomas, she's our finance person. She can give you a better breakdown of those, what that number is.
You actually can't add those two numbers together. The way the vehicles are split among the towns is you pay for a quarter of a vehicle every year. So that part that you see that's over $60,000, you're only paying for a quarter of that each year. And so you have the actual 100% cost of a deputy is $83,000 for salary and benefits, $83,800 currently. This doesn't take into consideration any salary and benefits increases that would come with the next budget year. That's the current year. For all of the operating costs, which is uniform, firearm, vehicle, cameras, all of that, after it's been amortized depending on the piece of equipment, for example, a firearm has a 15-year amortization. So we divide that over 15 years. Uniform pants have a 1 year, cars have a 4 year. So once that calculation is made, you add $31,992 to the $83,000 for a total of $115,849 per deputy. But then, since it's a 90-10 split, you're paying 90% of the 115, which gets you to the 104.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other questions or?
I've got a question regarding the, I guess you would call it the response times.
Yes, sir.
In 2018, based upon your chart, the response time for WC1, the contract every year was 9.5 seconds.
9.5 minutes.
I'm sorry, 9.5 minutes. That'd be quick, wouldn't it?
It would be very quick.
9.5 minutes. Based on your chart, population grew from 2018 to 2020 by about 1,000 folks. Our borders really didn't increase that much, but the response time went down to 5.5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Great question. Some of the calls that were assigned to him in 2020, we went back and looked at that by classification. I mean, you can really look at these numbers however you want to, and you can really get down in the weeds pretty low if you want to, and try to analyze why did it go down. And this was a great issue that it went down instead of going up. But he spent less time on some of the lower priority calls, basically. The calls where there was, a BOLA was given out, on the lookout for, a careless reckless driver. It's likely already gone. There's less time he spent as the primary unit assigned to that call as in years past. It was pretty much just more efficiency, I should say. And part of that was trying to keep him closer here, as opposed to spending a lot of time on calls that were very unlikely where he was going to identify a suspect.
Which leads me to my second question.
Yes.
I'm glad you went to that point. Are there calls that WC1 would, because they're not time sensitive, would let roll over to the other group of patrol members that would be in the area? For instance, serving civil waivers.
Well, he wouldn't be doing that. We have a civil.
He served 16 of them last month.
He might. I mean, there would have to be subpoenas or something. Subpoenas and things like that would count under that staff.
Yeah.
But those aren't dispatch calls where he's out serving that paper. he wouldn't be dispatched to do that.
Any other questions for the sheriff's office?
I'll give you guys a lot of accolades. I'm happy every month when Brandon sends us this report. I'm glad I live in this town based on this report because of the statistics. I mean, the January 2021 report that he sent us, monthly crime totals, 22. And of those 22, 21 of them were misdemeanors, only one was a felony. And I love living in that community.
Right.
I don't think anybody else, I don't know how we compare to everybody else in the county or even everybody else in the state, but this is where I like to live.
Right, sure.
Just as a little history, when we brought on our first deputy back in, I think we said it was 2012, we were collecting from the local businesses privilege licenses that offset the cost of the deputy, and the state stepped in and said we could no longer charge those privilege licenses about 6 years ago, Cheryl. And we said, we're going to, just because we're not getting the money to pay for them, we're going to keep this contract deputy on. We're just going to take it out of the general tax fund. And we've been doing that, carrying that for about 6 years, and I don't think anybody questions that it's not money well spent. The issue is, I think mostly, if you look at what our tax rate is compared to Indian Trail or Weddington or Marvin, our tax rate isn't anywhere near enough to justify, 27 deputies that Indian Trail has or anybody else on the list. Our mill rate or our tax rate is less than 2 cents. Right. And we have to scrape the bottom of the barrel every year to pay our bills and to make improvements to the town. To bring on extra deputies is going to be a real tough sell. I mean, I've talked to a lot of residents about this, and we put out a survey that we're going to be reviewing here, the results of shortly. One of the questions in the survey was, do you feel safe in Wesley Chapel? I think most of them said yes. The main reason people move here and live here is good schools, low taxes, low crime rate. And I think all that has to do, or a lot of it has to do with the sheriff specifically, that you make this a nice place to live. And if you look at the growth in our community, just over the last few years, it has just exploded. I mean, the roads aren't built wide enough, the water and sewer is an issue because everybody wants to move here, everybody wants to live here, and you guys are a part of that, why people move here. So, thank you, if nothing else.
Well, see, I think that's why we're here. We've got to make arrangements to move forward. You made our best argument just now. It is a good place to live. It's a safe place to live. Good community. But if we don't have officers to answer this call, then you'll see a decline in that. And we think it's important that you keep that here. And I don't have an answer for you on the budget. I looked at your tax rate, and you really don't have one.
Again, that's why people like living here. We've got good schools, low taxes, and it's a safe community, and we can control the tax side, I think, but I think most of the security and safety falls on your shoulders.
I would say this. Now, I don't have this on the chart. You're looking at $1.018 billion in rooftops in Wesley Chapel. I'm not sure that these people would mind if you raised the penny, but that's up to you. That ain't up to me.
Well, the county just informed us starting this month in February, they're doing a reassessment of our property values.
Well, that's the whole county.
Yeah, I know, that's the county, that's not Wesley Chapel. That's going to be a tough pill for most people to swallow to begin with. They're expecting that to be
I agree, and I know it's tough, but you've got to realize that as an elected official, you're elected for public safety. Your sole job is public safety. Now, I don't just mean law enforcement. I mean fire, rescue, things at EMS, the things that do with public safety. And to be honest with you, if you're not safe in your home, if you don't feel safe in your home, you don't care about anything else.
Well, most of the people I've spoke to said they do feel safe in their homes, and I think that's safe to you.
Well, I appreciate it.
So,
We want them to stay that way.
I'll definitely.
I would just say, I do think that when we talk about Wesley Chapel and the growth, we have to acknowledge the amount of growth that's not Wesley Chapel, but appears to be Wesley Chapel. There are many people who think they live in Wesley Chapel, but they don't. They're an unincorporated county. And I think that's a good distinction when we are thinking about passing through our borders. Yeah, they may be in a donut hole right in the middle of the village, like next door, passing through here. It looks like it's the residents, but it's not. So, you know, that is something that we are challenged with, that growth we have no control over, and yet the demand comes to the point of taxes. We raise taxes, but yet we have no impact, no ability to recoup that from any of the others that are surrounding us. So it's a tough situation.
I understand. I know money's hard to come by. I mean, I will.
Just printing it left and right.
I wish I could, like the federal government does. But I don't know, it's just, I don't have an answer for you, but it's something you got to face. That's why you were elected. And that's not an easy decision, but you got to make that decision.
Well, you came to us at exactly the right time, because we're getting ready to go into budget season next month, I think, or maybe the month after. And this is something we're going to have a long discussion about.
I understand.
So thank you for coming tonight, for your time, and thank you for all your service to Union County. Keep them safe. We really appreciate all y'all do.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I wish we really had y'all a good show put on.
You can email it to us and
We
we'll
will.
watch it, okay?
We'll get it all to you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Sheriff, just so you know, most of us went to the event you had last year over in Waxhaw Town Hall, and that was a lot of the same good information.
I appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Thank you. So we'll give them a minute to clear out, but next we're on to the public hearing on CEP 20-01, conditional use permit application for construction of a wireless telecommunications tower at 6719 Newtown Road. So I am going to open the public hearing. 8:03. I'm going to open the public hearing, and then anyone who is planning to speak, we need to get you sworn in, whether you're speaking for the applicant or not. We need you to come up to Cheryl and let everyone sworn in, right? Cheryl, come over there.
Can I get your names first?
Michael, last name is Berkowitz, B-E-R-K-O-W-I-T-Z.
Okay, and who else?
Ben Herrick, H-E-R-R-I-C-K.
Okay, anyone else?
Steve McKenna, Steve with PH.
I'm sorry, Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N?
Yeah, McKenna, M-C-K-E-N-N-A.
Okay, thank you.
Trent Hathaway, 2 T's.
Thank you.
John Yeagley, J-O-H-N.
And the last name?
Yeagley, Y-E-A-G-L-E-Y.
And Sean Jones, S-E-A-N.
Jones?
Jones, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Cheryl's going to swear y'all in now, so stand. A lot of you want to stand next to each other and then just raise your right hand and put your left hand towards the Bible, and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was now some good long time ago, we received an application parcel of land on Newtown Road for construction of a wireless telecommunications tower.
Well, give us an idea where this is. I know it's on Newtown Road, but what will be the closest cross street?
The 12 Mile Creek is actually
Because there is on page one of the vicinity map, but it's so small. I can't read it.
The address is 6719. The address associated with the parcel is actually the address for the house on the adjacent parcel, but that's the only address associated with it.
It's Newtown Road and 12 Mile Creek.
Yeah, so if you go west on Newtown Road, 12 Mile Creek will be the next landmark that you hit once you get past the, there's some electric high voltage transmission lines to the east of that and on into the interior of the property.
Okay.
So that's 6719 Newtown Road, parcel ID number 06105022. The applicant is Selco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless. They submitted an application for a 199-foot tall tower, that's 195 feet of tower plus a 4-foot lightning arrestor in a monopole configuration along with the pertinent service structures on the subject property. We had some discussions with the applicant at the beginning of this in terms of the area that would be required for acquisition through lease or ownership to have the tower. They arranged a lease with the property owner for the tower site, including the fall zone. The actual structure will be housed within a 60 by 60 foot fenced portion of that leased area. And a 12-foot gated gravel drive on a 30-foot wide access easement will provide access to the site from Newtown Road.
Well, in the future, don't mention fall zone when we're talking about town.
Well, it's a requirement of our ordinance, so we have there's a requirement of setback for that relates to the height of the.
We're not expecting this thing to fall down, are we?
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Luckily, they're designed to collapse upon themselves in general these days. The applicant did submit the proposed tower to the FAA's Construction Evaluation Airport Airspace Analysis Division as required. And FAA returned a notice of no hazard. FAA doesn't approve or deny applications for tall structures. They just determine whether or not one would pose a hazard to safe aerial navigation.
Did that take into account the airport that's just miles down the road?
And so, despite the FAA's determination of no hazard, the planning board did raise some additional questions and concerns during that public information meeting. Regarding the aero plantation, and the applicant related to me some discussions they had with the manager of aero plantation airport. They expressed some concerns that the tower was not proposed originally to be lighted because of its height. Was not required to be lighted, and so the airport manager expressed a concern that during the daytime that they would not have any issues with it because it would be visible and low enough, but at night they were concerned that safe separation distance, if somebody got off course making their pattern, taking off or landing at the airport, it might not be known to them, especially when it's new, if it did not have a beacon. So the applicant speaks a little bit more to that, but a beacon has at least entered the discussion by that point. Our ordinance basically requires some consideration for co-location to be given, so the permanent application does include a design of the tower and additional equipment area at the base to accommodate 3 additional antennae. That's required when it's over 150 feet in height, as this one is. The fenced area will be landscaped per our standards in the ordinance. During the planning board public information meeting, they requested that instead of the standard gray chain link fencing, that a black coated chain link fencing be used, and that did not appear to have any issue with that. The surrounding land uses, so basically got this property on the south side of Newtown Road. 12 Mile Creek, as I mentioned earlier, is immediately due west of there. Cutherson to the east. This is going to the west and south by the large undeveloped tracts of land. The eastern neighbor is actually the owner of this property itself. Their residence is there, as I mentioned. There are other neighbors to the north across the street, larger, what I consider to be kind of rural residential tracts of land. The zoning of the property is R40, which is the predominant zoning district within the village of Wesley Chapel. Although it's primarily residential intent, it does allow for the placement of telecommunication towers upon the receipt of a conditional use permit. Future land use is designated as low-density residential, so the future land use plan essentially contemplates its eventual development with probably typical R40 type standard development. Some discussion was had during the planning board public information meeting about what would, if this land was to develop at one time, how the site would be integrated. And so they do have that leasehold area. Nothing can be built within that leasehold area as long as the tower is there. So it would actually have to go around that leasehold area. Let's see. Access again, they would have to get a DOT driveway permit if they're approved. Let's see. Public information held back in October, actually, and they did ultimately provide a recommendation of approval, even though that recommendation does not bear any weight on the council's hearing. That's just basically an anecdotal recounting of the planning board public information meeting. And so tonight, the applicant is here, maybe others who might wish to speak about this proposed conditional use permit. As we know, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and Cheryl has done the training of those who will be providing testimony. Just as a note for the record, there were two pieces of ex parte communication that were delivered to the council by an attorney on behalf of the neighbor, one prior to the previously scheduled meeting, one prior to this evening. Both of those have been provided to the applicant as well. Let's see. Again, this originally scheduled to take place in December. There was a defect in the notification. This telecommunication towers uniquely in our ordinance specify that the applicant is supposed to send the mail notice, and so they did, and there was a bit of a defect in that, and out of abundance of caution, decided to postpone it. Yes.
You say the neighbors have been notified?
The neighbors have received mail notification. There have been a sign. There have been newspaper advertisements. Yes.
How far out?
300 feet.
Pardon me?
300 feet.
300 feet?
From the site.
From the site. So how many neighbors does that include? Roughly.
I can get you
and it was round numbers, 20 or 25, maybe something like that.
It's only 300 feet?
From the whole parcel.
From the parcel.
Okay, from the main parcel. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
And so uniquely, this telecommunication tower required the applicant send the notices, and so that's why, unfortunately, there was a bit of a defect in nomenclature in it, and so out of abundance of caution, postponed to give time to cure that defect and hold the hearing. Fortunately, we had some experience going through conditional use permit recently, so you're, of course, well-schooled in requirements of both the hearing and the findings, and so those are listed for you in your staff report there. The other thing to note is that in addition to the general standards for conditional use permit, the zoning ordinance further states that in determining if a telecommunications tower should be approved or denied, the planning board and village council may take into account the tower's harmony with the surrounding area and its compatibility with adjacent properties. The aesthetic effects of the tower, as well as any mitigating factors concerning the aesthetics, may be used to evaluate a conditional use permit. And in reaching a decision, the village council may request the height, design, screening, placement, or other characteristics of the tower be modified to produce a more harmonious situation. So that's specifically stated in the ordinance, and so that those can be taken into account in addition to the 7 factors that are generally applicable findings of fact related to conditional use permits. And that is, unless there are any other questions for me at this time, I'd be happy to turn it over to the applicant.
So what did you say the tower height was?
I'm sorry?
How tall was this?
199 feet, so it's 194 feet of tower plus 195 feet of tower and 4 feet of a lightning arrestor.
And just as a point of reference or scale, how tall are those power lines that would be close by? You know, roughly, is it going to be taller than the power lines?
Yes.
How many stories is 199 feet?
How many stories?
Yeah, like if I was relating it to a building.
So if I think figure 12 to 14 feet a story. So.
No.
14, 15, 16.
If you get that close to the power lines, it's not going to cause
No, sir.
any interference?
No, sir. name is Ben Herrick, and I'm from Falk and Foster Real Estate. My colleague, Jim LePan, prepared all the written materials, but then he retired, so I'm just here to take the glory for the rest of it, but I'll text him later if he still remembers who I am. So I would like to go over what we put, rather than read everything into the record. There has been a lot submitted in writing, so I'll just briefly hit the highlights of what we submitted, so that we have it, we don't miss anything. The original application contained the application form, all the fees, stamped engineering drawings, a letter from Verizon Wireless, aerial photos of the site with various frames of reference, certification from the landowner, the FAA no hazard determination, which did in fact account for the arrow plantation strip. We did have a letter from the airport manager, an FCC form about emissions, certificate of insurance, an engineering specification letter, statement of mailing, and some expert radio frequency testimony. And I have the radio frequency engineer here tonight who can speak live. That was the original application. And then after that, there was some additional materials presented to respond to a letter from your attorney. It was a very nicely done letter. We've also brought with us and have already submitted propagation maps, zoning maps, additional aerial photos, the map of the transmission towers, an email from PeakNet about the towers, and another one about a second tower, the ETT towers. Those were the materials that we submitted. We also submitted some specifications that was discussing the light beacon that was discussed on if it could be shielded from the ground or not. So Verizon Wireless's preference is no light, because no light is required. So we'd rather have what is required, and we'd rather not put a light on the towers. The FAA says we don't have to put a light. We'd rather not go through the expense, and not just the expense. It's just more hassle than it's worth, and we don't feel the safety is required. The FAA is in charge of that. They took the Arrow Plantation airstrip into account when they gave us a no hazard determination. We're below the threshold that is required generally for lighting of towers. The airport people say, well, we'd rather have a light just as an abundance of caution. We understand that. If the town board requires us to put a light, we can speak with the manufacturer about some sort of ground shield on that. There were some specs that we submitted. That particular one was not FAA approved or FCC approved, but a private company does those. We do feel like we could get a shield from the lighting manufacturer that could screen from the ground, because the point of the light is to shine up, not down. And there would be a low intensity red light, not a strobe, just a low intensity red light at night, so that airplanes, and I don't know how many airplanes land in that airstrip after dark. I suspect it's not many. So that would be our preference is no light. Okay, so we've gone over that. I would also like the board to take a little bit of notice of the Telecommunications Act. In '96, Bill Clinton signed into law the Telecommunications Act, and there's one pertinent part of it that says the decisions to deny a cell tower or a telecommunications facility must be made in writing based on substantial evidence on the record. Once we show that there's a need for the service needs a new tower, if we've shown that, then the burden shifts to the denial part. And that's a federal standard, and not many people really understand the concept of the burden shifting from, normally the applicant has to prove something and then you can get your approval. Well, if we prove enough, the burden shifts to the deniers. So they have to show evidence on the record why it should be denied. And I know it's probably not what you want to hear, but that's why I've got my experts here tonight. So I've got Mr. Berkowitz, and I want to bring him up to talk about, he submitted a real estate evaluation report. And Mr. Berkowitz, you've been sworn in. And you're a local guy, right? You're on, where's your office? You live in Concord?
Yes, I've done a lot of work in Union County over the last 15 years. Worked for Indian Trail, worked with City of Monroe, Union County, worked in quite a bit in the county over the years. What I was asked to do is prepare an impact study for the proposed tower, and to determine whether the tower as proposed would impact surrounding property values. There are two ways an appraiser can do that. One is through a quantitative analysis. The second is through a qualitative analysis. In a quantitative analysis, you're looking to isolate the potential impact of that singular item. I provided three examples, including one on Providence Road in Union County, the Inverness, I believe, is one subdivision, the Vickery and Indian Trail. I can't remember the third one off the top of my head, where there was visibility, including one in the Inverness, which has a light on the top, because I know people were concerned about that. When you look at comparative analysis in properties within the same subdivision, same builder, same relative year built, you can isolate the visual impact of that tower. The market data provided no evidence of a diminution in value of any of the properties with visual impact from the tower. Second way that I would look at this is from a qualitative standpoint. This tower is going to be located near Iron Maidens that are out there, the transmission lines. The fact that that is a much larger visual impact, just from a sheer visual footprint, is much more intrusive than the cell tower. Based upon those facts and the market data, there's little traffic. These things are essentially silent. Based upon that analysis, it was my conclusion that this tower, as proposed, would not injure property values of the surrounding properties. The properties on Cuthbert, this is a 35-acre site, so you have properties all the way on Cuthbert's in the road. I doubt you'd be able to see it, considering the existing vegetative properties between there. The ones that are along Newtown Road, there might be some visual impact. Some of it will be obscured. But again, all those properties also have visual impact from the iron mains and the transmission towers, the electrical transmission lines. So that was my conclusion. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Question. How do you choose a location as far as where you're going to put these towers?
Excuse me?
How do you decide where the towers needs to be?
That's an RF question. That's a technical question. I'm just a lowly appraiser. They tell me where they're going to put them. I know I do have a background in that. I think they have to work with and communicate between towers and things of that nature, so you don't get drop calls.
Can we wait until that expert comes up?
Yeah. I don't have to worry about any drop calls. I'm the only guy probably in this room who doesn't know what's going on.
That's true. That's probably true.
So you already think about So when you think about the visual impact, you're talking about the electrical towers and the lines. So there's a lot of clear cutting, so to speak, around the power lines. Is there anything like that around these towers?
We keep as much of the existing vegetation intact as possible.
So the amount of clear space to see the structure is less relative to
Correct.
the electrical towers, even though this tower would be taller.
Correct. So the compound where the equipment is will be cut if there's anything in there. And I think in this case we chose a location where we didn't have to do very much cutting at all. Then the access road, and that's it. But there are many, and the landscape details will show you, and the overall site plan will show you just how many trees are going to stay. And it's quite a bit.
And again, the towers, how far off of Newtown Road?
Let me get that exact. Let me get that exact.
Where are these maps and pictures they're talking about?
277 feet from the road is where the tower is.
So really, there's no issue with screening with bushes or anything like that, so far off the road that it's.
Well, even so, you will have landscaping around the town.
They pick up their own stuff.
I didn't pick it up.
There's also an existing
I didn't see it.
vegetative buffer
Okay.
between the road and the site that's going to stay.
Man, do you need to see this on the map?
She might be around.
The other question while she's getting that, we recently approved a natural gas substation right up the street here. And what we approved was basically the natural gas substation. What we found out afterward is they wanted to store trucks, equipment, materials, all kinds of other stuff inside the fence line of that thing, and we immediately get pushback. I want to make sure that if we approve this, the only thing that's going to be there is the tower and the necessary equipment to run it. And you're not going to be storing anything else, equipment, trucks, materials, nothing else is going to be
This is
stored.
an unmanned facility. Verizon will visit it 2 to 4 times per month, if that, for maintenance once it's built. During the initial construction, it takes about 30 to 45 days. You may have some trucks there while they're stacking the tower and doing the initial construction, but after that, it's a van type service type vehicle that comes 2 to 4 times per month.
And when you had the initial public meetings, what kind of feedback, if any, did you get from the surrounding neighborhood?
The only feedback was from Mr. Hathaway.
What's this thing on the lights?
It's a monopole, so it's not the kind with a big base and then goes triangular up to the top. It's a straight pole.
The tree at the top.
No tree at the top.
Still no.
That would stick out more than a regular monopole. All right, let me bring up Stephen McKenna to talk about, to answer your question of why we need the tower and why it's sited here.
I think one of your original questions was what you make the decision for the tower. So typically there's 2 factors that feed into that. One is coverage. And basically, if you have a lot of coverage between the area of drop calls, which most of probably use.
What's that for him?
Yeah, exactly, right. Or another issue that goes into is capacity. So we have surrounding sites, and one where we're proposing for a new tower. But those sites are heavily loaded because we only have a certain amount of space for the local users in terms of their throughput. So typically what it means for you folks would be slow internet, basically low stuttering Netflix, things like that. So this site is primarily for coverage along to help out with capacity. So we decided where to put the site was based on 4 coverage areas to help the throughput, the drop calls, as well as improve the throughput in some surrounding areas application.
So all the Verizon customers in the area will be better service.
Correct.
Where are the existing towers that this is going to supplement?
There's a site called Benton down south. These are the coverage shows.
Just roughly.
There's a site to the southeast, southwest, and there's a site to the northeast. And in your plot on the second, show the cover of the.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
They've all got it. It's just,
This is basically the location Verizon has it, and basically this is the existing site out here, and the ones with the little sectors, basically the pipe and that's the sector.
And is the gap in coverage right in the middle of
The gap in coverage is right in between this area here. We have drop calls coming down along here. As you can see here, these 2 sectors here are colored differently because they have lower throughput because those sectors are on this particular site are heavily loaded. By having a site in this general location here, it will offload to the capacity. So this particular area here, which is being served by this sector currently, will now be handled by this new site, which will free up the capacity in this particular location to give that sector more available capacity for the users in that particular location.
Stephen, is it fair to say that the more people that are moving into an area and the more users there are, the more strain that is on the existing sites?
Correct.
Is that what you mean by covered by
Capacity.
capacity?
It's like, kind of like an analogy of like the water pipe. And when you start the number of feet, the more people that drink from it, the slower the water flow is, and when you start the amount goes through in the first place. So that's kind of an analogy that I use to that. At a certain point, as you have more users in the area, and in that area, the water pipe gets narrower and narrower for the end user, it lower in terms of what you can support your phone, like video conference and things like that become unusable because you don't have a database to support that.
So is that capacity rated for 4G or 5G
4G.
or both? So is this new tower targeted to address 4G capacity and 5G?
4G. This one right now is deployed in the 5G area also, so we have the 5G deployments, 850 nationwide. That also have to
I've heard on very specifically the location. That's what I was like also getting at. As you said, as there's more growth in the area for capacity, the 5G is more demanding of capacity. There would be other towers in this area that you can tell.
I foresee for this particular area, this tower should suffice for a number of years, I think, in terms of what is required in terms of capacity for the operations area.
Also, you discussed, talked about the light. Do you know what the cost would be if you did put a light on top of this tower?
I don't know the specific light costs, but it's not exactly a cost factor. I mean, Verizon, let's be honest, they're a very wealthy company.
They can afford to put a light up there if they were forced to.
Right. They would put the light up, but their preference is to not have the light.
And when we sent out these mailers, who did we get, other than Mr. Hathaway, did we get feedback from any of the other people we got on this too?
Not comments per se. I had maybe 2 or 3 emails or phone calls inquiring probably first about the public information meeting that the planning board held. That's when I received probably the most inquiries. Really haven't heard from the attorney from the neighbor in recent weeks, but not other folks around there.
And one other question, based on the information we're hearing today, are we required to vote on this tonight?
No.
Okay.
So part of the radio frequency maps that I see she's thumbing through, we compared this to other potential sites. Stephen, can you go through?
Yeah, so in this location's comparison, I've done a number of points here. The first one is our Verizon manager. That's the one we look at and prefer to have in this particular location. Some of the locations was given by real estate, there's point A by Carl with the east, that would be the next one that we look at in terms of coverage plots. There's a school marked C down here. B was, I think, was a deep energy location, and D was a commercial area. So we expect to know the first slide. In the header, you'll see just called existing coverage. This is basically showing where existing coverage is in this particular area.
Without the new tower.
Without the new tower. You'll see in all these plots, there'll be the location where we prefer. But this one is not taken into account for the recycling part. So the area marked in red, like I mentioned there, we want to improve the drop-off performance in that particular area. The blue is a certain threshold of coverage is starting to get low. That's why in those particular areas you start seeing more drop calls, particularly in the building and that nature. We move to the next site entitled Existing Proportion Verizon Site Coverage. This one shows basically our coverage with the Verizon report site. Then we look at the point A, which is over to the east. There's relatively this location here. This site is too far to the east, right? That's about, if I remember correctly, about 1.7 miles away from where we have the location right now, where we prefer. You see the coverage here is still more or less the same as we saw on the first slide. It's not improving the coverage there, and they're going to drop, even though the site is the same height. We move to the next slide. This is the deep energy location, so this is the energy site, and then that's the B location. We want to compare it to the original first slide with the Earth. Again, this site is 140 feet high. It's lower than what we're proposing, and you can see the coverage is not as good. The area is highlighted in blue. listed areas in blue here. So those are areas we want to improve, again, for drop fall performance. If we move to the next slide, and please stop me if any questions as we go through this. This one is entitled Existing School Sites Seed Coverage. This is a school. Here, it's quite far away from this particular site location. It is open up holes, but there's coverage holes in terms of drops and so on. There's one consideration here. We have this site down southwest called Wellington. This is only about a mile away from the location we're proposing, and that would cause what we call interference issues potentially. Usually we try to keep away at least 1.3 miles from the existing site. So that's an interesting consideration for that particular location. This is commercial. The next slide is just the commercial structure D coverage. This site was just a height of pretty good. It was recommended to get in this particular area. As you can see, the coverage is very small coverage area in comparison to the Verizon recommended site. And we have quite a large coverage area once again in those particular locations. So those are the points that we were asked to consider for the coverage comparisons. Any questions or?
So make sure I understand what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Is you looked at existing other locations for this, the industrial, the Duke, the school,
Yeah.
and compared the coverage of what you got compared to this location you're in.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll let you know.
And it was your conclusion that none of those other options would solve the problem that you're trying to solve with this tower?
Correct.
I have a question, maybe it's a dumb one. So this is on 35 acres, right?
Yes,
So at some point, the landowner says, hey, I want to sell half of it, can they? So it could take away part of this buffer that we're saying that neighbors will have to see it.
They can sell the whole thing, but your lease, I would suppose, carries through.
So your lease is for the whole property?
No, our lease is for the area of the property that will be affected. Okay, so our leased area includes the quote-unquote fall zone, which is in the event of a catastrophic failure of the tower, where the engineers feel like the tower, in the unlikely event of a categorical failure, that's where it would fall. That's the lease area. And it's on the circle. If you look on C1.1 of the plans, you'll see a dashed circle around the tower, and it's a 199 foot radius for the tower height. So if you draw a circle around the tower for the tower height, that's the fall zone, that's the lease area. Now it's a different question when you have homes that are built after the tower's up, because presumably they know what they're looking at before they build their house and they can make a decision.
Right.
It's a different case when you have an existing beautiful home that's going to be affected by a tower across the street.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking, like you say that you're going to put up this tower and there's going to be a buffer because there's already this existing vegetation, so people aren't going to see it, but then if it's later developed where you still are leasing the land.
Well, there won't be any new development between the tower and the road based on where we have the tower sited. It would be further back on the property.
You said it was 270.
Right, so it's 277 feet from the road, and then the fall zone is 200 feet. So really there isn't that much room to put houses along the road between the tower and I don't know if a designer would really do that. They would probably go to the other end. All right, let's have you go on the record, Mr. Yeagley. John Yeagley's a real estate.
So I'm John Yeagley with Chase Real Estate Services. Our company does site acquisition for Verizon Wireless all over North and South Carolina. I happen to be a Union County resident, and I've lived here for 18 years. So anyway, I know the area and some of the concerns. What I was going to add was this current site to the east, where we have it positioned, is all floodplain. So we are not in the floodplain, we're not developing in the floodplain. We worked with the planner to make sure that we're not affecting that. But what I'm going is, if your concern is about future buffering and residential all around this, there can't be anything between there and the power lines because it is all floodplain. And in fact, we can't use those power lines closest to the tower because they are in the floodplain. So that's why we investigated them and tried to see if we could use them, but we can't.
So we're limited on the road side, on the east side of the floodplain, so that leaves the south and the west side, potentially, if there's a parcel subdivided.
I misspoke. It's the west side. It's the floodplain. I'm sorry. Right. So the east side is a cleared field that is, it was recently timbered in the last 5 years or so, but they did maintain a vegetated buffer along Newtown Road.
Is there anyone else here to speak on the applicant?
I think we've addressed everything that we really needed to. Let me just. I think we've heard from all of the experts that we speak here from. I mean, Mr. Sean could say more about the radio frequency, but I think Mr. McKenna covered that pretty well. I would just
Yes, ma'am. Question on that, from a safety perspective of the radio frequencies, I know it's something that comes up with electrical lines and cell tower lines. I'm just not familiar with the science for cell phone towers.
We far exceed any FCC exposure limits. The FCC is in charge of setting the exposure limits, and as a general rule of thumb, the farther you are away from the antennas, the less you're exposed to the non-ionizing radiation that is caused by the antennas. That's why they're in the air so high. One of the reasons.
I guess what I was going to add was the location and proximity to the existing transmission line corridor is something that we've found as a real estate site act firm working in other jurisdictions, that planning boards and communities would look at the tower close to the right-of-way, as a part, not a part of the right-of-way, but at least it's, the eye is used to seeing the transmission structure. Yes, it's 130 feet. Our tower will be a single pole that's 190 feet. But, sometimes the argument is made that that's aesthetically, it's part of the right-of-way, kind of thing. It's not, it's just another structure in that area.
We just don't want our residents to start knowing.
Correct, okay, and that's the RF guys that know and talk all about it.
Right, so I get your point about the visual aspect of it, by keeping everything close together, it appears to be more of a utility area.
Right.
And I get your point about deep from it, that combination that you mentioned.
Yes, we are, if you look in the packet, one of the items in the initial submission was a categorical exclusion form that the FCC provides. If you're over, I think the threshold is like 40 feet in the air for your tower, you're basically categorically excluded from having to worry about the radiation from the antennas. That's in your packet on the initial, towards the end, in the initial package.
So everybody's questioning for you here. Anybody else want?
Do you want to?
For or against?
Anybody else to speak?
All right, thank you guys. I thought I was done with Bill Clinton next week.
You're welcome.
Yeah, still getting me. Anyway, as you hear.
Just state your name and address.
Oh, sorry, Trent Hathaway, 68 Newtown Road.
Mr. Hathaway, if there are any questions that you would like to ask of the applicants as well,
Oh, correct. Thank you. Thank you.
First question, 4G. I didn't understand that response versus 5G. I think it was you that made that. It is a 4G tower. Okay, and it will always be a 4G tower.
5G, there's different, 5G covers range above the 40 megahertz. Yeah. So 5G spans a lot of different frequencies. Basically, the 5G that I'm talking about here spans the same frequency we've been used for the last 20 years, and it makes a year coverage.
So so it'll be 5G tower ultimately.
5G, yeah, what we call low band 850 megahertz spectrum, which has been used the last 20 years. One of the first things we deployed.
Well, that's interesting because it was one of my points. When I first started talking to Jim about this, when the first ordinance or the notice came out, I specifically asked, is this 4G or 5G? And he said, no, this is a 4G tower. I said, okay. You read all the news about 5G, and let's just be honest, nobody wants that, right? Even if you believe that you don't want it next to your house because you just don't know. So I think some of the reason I'm the only one here, probably these are some of the explanations that were given. In short, 4G was the justification of the tower. And everybody's like, I spoke to my neighbors. Some of them are like, well, I don't want to get involved, and just make sure it's not 5G. And I'm like, well, he told me it's 4G. So that's kind of why I'm here. Is I know I can't stop progress. Let's be honest. We all want this stuff. I got phones. In fact, I got Verizon. I like your service. I can't stop that. I'm not asking to stop that. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying let's don't put the tower. My recommendation is to move the tower. Here's how I see it. The neighbor has a lot of land that wants to put this tower in. Verizon or somebody approached the neighbor, and I'm sure that it's very lucrative. I mean, I've read about these things. $60,000, $70,000 a year. I don't know where they're at now, but you read that's out there. Very lucrative to have a tower on your property, and especially if you can push it out of your site at the lower end of your field. And my question is with city council, my dad was on the city council in Georgia, and we used to talk about, what do y'all talk about? He said, well, the main thing is making sure people build fences and don't put the ugly side out to the neighbors, and kind of keep the common grace going. And so I'm kind of asking for time to have this opportunity to say, surely, out of all places in Union County, if an independent study was looking at this, would they say this is the spot, the exact spot? Or say, move it 500 feet away from the road. Would that not suffice too? Or, well, wait a minute now, that's moving it closer to the leaseholder's residence. Maybe that's not good for them. Okay, we'll move it in another direction. Surely there's a better location on his property so he can retain this lease, which is very lucrative, and I think it's smart of him, honestly. But don't stick it right in front of your neighbor's house. Now, the reason it's there, I think, largely, is if you look at the shape of the land, you'll see it constrains down and there's floodplain. And so they're sticking it right on the edge of the floodplain, as they mentioned, and in a part of the land that has the least economic impact on the total value of this property, which is 2 parcels, pretty large, that one day will become a neighborhood. Being honest, he'll sell it for $60,000 to $70,000 an acre, as everybody else is doing, and which I'm not opposed to. So I'm not anti-growth. I'm just saying, but strategically, it has the least impact. And if you're going to build a tower and make money on it, why not move it in a place that at least the neighbors can say, I think I can live with that. I'm not trying to stop this tower. I'm just saying move it a little bit. Don't put it right in front of my front door. And there's just all kinds of coincidences about this.
And I'm sure other people, if they knew this was going to be 5G ultimately, and reading the things people say about 5G, there'd be more people concerned. But that wasn't the way it was presented when you called or when you emailed. And I have it in an email form, and he told me it was going to be a 4G tower. And I think that's the response other people got as well. So my argument is buy time to investigate. What the real, is this really the best spot? Buy time to understand. We just asked for all kinds of documents which they presented to you. I saw them Friday for the first time. And I don't know why, because I'm the one that asked for it. But they sent them to the city, I guess, 10, 11 days ago. No way the city's been able to comprehend all that data in 10 or 11 days. And I saw them on Friday. And so I'm saying, can we not buy time for me to digest all this study of why this is the only location that can serve this purpose? Can we not buy time so I can maybe negotiate? Hey, just push it a little up on the land a little further. And I think have some sincerity about the intent of 5G with the general public when people ask. Because that was not how it was presented. Now the light, I'll be honest with you, I didn't like the idea of a light, but I'm a pilot. I understand the reason you need a light. Hell, I don't want somebody to hit it and run right in front of my house. So I'm okay with the light, but at least move it just a little bit up the hill, over closer to the residence that's going to receive the benefit from this dang thing. And not stick it right in front of my house. That's my request, is to buy time so we can actually work through that process. I'm not sure if they're willing to. I don't know if the landowner is willing to. But we're just now getting the data as of Friday, and there's no way we've been able to digest it. And let's be honest, these guys are well-established unit. They do this in front of city councils every single day. This is what they do. They're professionals. Us, the residents, have to take Bill Clinton's Act of 96, and we have to take all the burden of proving that there's another alternative. And I just ask you guys to consider the fact that one day you're not going to be on city council. And maybe you're going to buy a parcel of land, and you're going to have yourself 5 to 10 acres, and you think it's peaceful, and then your neighbors want to put a cell tower across the road from you. I'm not trying to stop progress. I just want to negotiate where this thing is going to visibly be right out of my front door.
Do we have a map? Yeah, like a map that shows where, I can't get the visual of where his house is. Yeah.
I have this, and that was just, but it's just a GIS. It's not really.
Is this your driveway?
Yeah. So my house is to the right of that.
Where's your, okay.
This might show.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at it from the parcel perspective. You know, the parcel is there, where the tower, where the tower would be compared to the property.
Pretty much right outside my front door.
Can we see that?
If I can come right to the.
So, this is the general area, this is your house.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
So, again, that's the residence, this is the power line that runs through there, that's the location.
So this is the circle?
Yeah.
And where's the highways?
Correct.
Is that one across Newtown?
Yeah.
And where's the floodplain?
The floodplain. So here is the map. So this is all here.
And you're not allowed to give out anything?
Call me later.
Yeah, you have to leave it.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Yeah, well.
So I'm showing here's the floodplain, and there's your home. So, proposed site in the home.
This is the floodplain here. Where it went here,
Yeah,
home
and
was
just
where?
right here. So we go to the following page. That
Can
one.
you go back to the previous page? Where are the power lines?
Power lines run right through here.
Okay.
Yeah. As you go here, you can see them running
Right.
here.
Okay.
And then there's the bigger, so there's the power line right away, there's all the surrounding parcels.
Okay.
So, like I was showing, this is the power line right away, existing site, because they're having a home.
If I could pass out this, I would show you what I would be recommending, is to move it. We're talking about feet, not miles. And I wish they would give me the time. I think they really wanted to move this meeting forward. Well, actually, Jim apparently retired. So that's kind of slip that down.
But this is still running.
Who is,
Where's the land? Where's
the
that?
email from him told me to contact somebody. Oh, Vicky, yes. So,
And who decided that that was the spot on the 35 acres that was the best location?
That's a combination of meeting with the property owner and discussing. And, you know, I will tell you, it's not paying $70,000 a year for this type of lease.
So you gave us a document that shows the property, the parcel, where the tower would be, the star.
Star
Is
is
the-
approximate. I didn't.
I know, but the star is roughly where they said they want to site the tower, and you are the house directly across the street.
Yes, and so I'm asking, and you gotta remember now, so where the tower is, it's not just level ground. It is up, that's elevated, so it's even higher because you kind of go up a hill there. So my recommendation is just move it a little further back where it's out of view. I've gone to great lengths to plant large vegetation, large oak trees, spent lots of money to hide this buffer of these towers that are along bordering my property. And now I've got a mega tower across the street that I can't really do anything about because you got Union Power running down the road. You can't really put anything out there. And so if it would move back a little bit, it would actually be out of my view. And I'm the only one here really protesting. I've asked my neighbors, and she's like, well, I don't want to do anything to neighbors. Okay, that's fine. But I'm here. And so get it out of my view. And surely that won't change the impact of this, of this tower's effectiveness. Now, again, go ahead.
Mr. Hathaway, I know this is the first time here, and I know you didn't have a lot of communication back and forth with Verizon people and probably with Vaughn or planning and zoning yesterday. I can't speak for the other 4 people, the other 3 people sitting here, but based on the volume of information and everything else and how long we've had this, I'm specifically going to be pushing for no vote today on this. And we'll see what my fellow council members say, because there's a lot of unanswered questions here that I would like to do a little bit more investigation on. And the one specific one, I think you asked me, but I'm not sure you got a very clear answer. This tower is a 4G tower, correct?
Correct.
It will always be a 4G tower, or is there a time in the future that it could be a 5G tower?
Well, the tower itself, let's have Sean speak to that. Sean, can you maybe explain the difference between what people think of as 5G, that's going to kill everybody and make me 3 eyes, and what's 4G that we have right now?
Yeah, so really 4G, 5G is the technology. That's what it is. It's not.
My only question is this tower going to stay a 4G forever, or will there be an opportunity in the future for it to be upgraded to a 5G tower?
The antennas that are mounted to the tower, that's what determines if it's a 4G or a 5G. Not the tower itself, it's just steel.
The tower's
Right.
small, it's
It's the
whatever.
technology at the top.
So right now, we're proposing they can put the antennas up. The antennas they're putting up now are 4G antennas.
You're skirting the question.
No, so ask.
Will it ever be, or could it ever be, a 5G tower in the future?
Yes, I mean, it could
That's
be.
the question.
But what does that mean? I want Sean here to say, what does that mean if we switch antennas?
Well, the question that Mr. Hadway and his neighbor seem to have is it 5G? And the answer was no, it's 4G, but the question is, potentially in the future, could it possibly ever be 5G? And the answer to that question is yes.
Yes, because the antennas are what determine if it's 4G or 5G. But Sean, can you explain what that means?
Yes, obviously there's a lot of information out there about 5G, and a lot of it is substantiated as far as based on data. But just to give you a little background, 5G is another technology that Verizon is deploying, very similar to how we deployed 4G. We had 3G before that, and before that 2G, and before that we had analog as far as technology. All those different technologies were deployed on all existing frequencies we have in our kind of bucket. Right, we have a lot of frequencies we deploy technology. 5G isn't deployed on just one specific frequency. It's deployed on different frequencies throughout our bucket of spectrum. And so, as you mentioned, yes, in the future, there's potential this tower will have 5G on it. Once again, that is another technology. Just like we had before when we had 3G went to 4G. We added new technology to our existing infrastructure to provide additional service. So that it uses the same frequency that we had 3G on, and then we add 4G to it to add, data services, high throughput. 5G is something very similar. We add that technology to our existing tower, using existing frequencies that are already being deployed, provides higher throughput, better service to the customer. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, because I assume you upgraded the 3G towers to 4G, just so the technology changes.
That's
And
right.
I think that, I've not heard all the health concerns that you were alluding to. I had thought that I had heard was based on the spectrum and the bandwidth of 5G, that you could end up with more towers, needing to have more towers that are close together in order to provide a further 5G service.
Okay. I think I know what you're asking. Those are the towers that you think of like utility poles with the little garbage can on top.
So once again, it depends on the area that we're deploying. So like a lot of times we have dense urban locations. We have smaller locations that we're deploying 5G at that are small, but they also cover a smaller footprint. This is a more larger area, rural area, as well as an up-and-coming capacity area. And so we deploy towers on there that we deploy 4G on, and then eventually deploy the technology like 5G.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Earlier you mentioned they're relatively silent towers. What is the decibel level of a 4G versus a 5G tower that's currently there?
The only thing that makes noise is the emergency backup generator.
And the air conditioning,
And the air conditioner.
like your household air conditioner. So if they have a fan, the cabinet has a little fan.
Do you know the decibel level?
It's equal to go outside your house and listen to your air conditioner. That's exactly, it's less than that. I think we could drive down here to Wellington, to the Optimus Park, and stand by the cabinets, and you can listen to hear what it is, and you'll notice nothing. I mean, it's like a household air conditioner.
So when I like to describe when they exercise the generators, it's like a commercial lawnmower going for an hour.
That's not something I love all the time.
And they do it all the time.
Mike does not want to vote on this tonight. He wants some time to review the information more.
And there's a lot to take in here. I realize.
Agreed.
So in that case, we would pause the public hearing, adjourn the public hearing.
I mean, I'll let Vaughn say if I'm wrong, but we were just talking about that. But, I mean, I think you would want to delay, leave it open, but I think you'd also want to identify, if you know now certain items that you want a response to, I think you would want to identify that as much as you can now, so the applicant has some idea of what you're looking for at a continued hearing. But Otherwise you would need to close the public hearing and then delay the vote, but then you wouldn't be able to take
Any more?
additional evidence.
Okay. I think we'll have questions
Yeah,
after.
so I think we should delay it. I personally, because the landowner's not here, right? So Wesley Chapel prides itself on listening to its residents. This council does especially. So I would like to see a little more information about why this spot on that property was chosen. Whether that means the landowner comes and speaks, or y'all come and speak to it, but why directly across from the resident's house? Was this location chosen as the best spot on that 35 acres? Anybody else?
I mean, John,
Information?
I mean, come on, why don't you come on?
This may sound direct, but there's economics involved, and it's the best use of that land for the business terms that we can negotiate with the property owner. So, although people think it may be $70,000 a year, I will tell you, it's fractions of that. So, to get a viable site that Verizon can zone, build, and negotiate a fair deal, we have spent the last year working on this. And these sites don't just happen. We can't just put it in the middle of the field and then put that big circle around it and tell this guy, hey, don't develop that area because your neighbor wants it over that way. I mean, we appreciate, I understand that, but you're a businessman, you gotta understand the finances of this. And I spend a lot of time, and I try to pride myself in trying to find a good, suitable spot for our client that, you know, I thought we did pretty good, given Wesley Chapel, Weddington, all this area and all this growth, to only have one person show up. I mean, I'm sorry, but we got transmission lines running here, where we kind of tucked it in by the transmission lines. I'm like, we finally got one. There's a big vegetation buffer all along Newtown. I don't know.
I won't say you didn't do your due diligence, but from our perspective, we have to look at it from the applicant's perspective, the homeowner's, the property owner's perspective, the neighboring property's perspective. We have to take in all of that before we can move forward. And this is like drinking from a fire hose right now. I think what it's going to take us a while to chew on this. Come up with our list of concerns from the landowner's perspective, from your perspective, from the neighbor's perspective, to make sure that when we vote on this, we're looking at what's best for everyone in the long term.
Right, and we appreciate you guys have been working on it for months, years, and we want it out. So,
I'm sorry?
because of this quasi-judicial process, you know, we've had limited background and understanding of this project until tonight, so it is a lot to take in.
We appreciate that. Just one thing I would note, and Roland can back me up on this, there is, you know, we agreed to, there is a federal statute that requires a reasonable time, and, you know, we told that time a little bit. I'm not saying that you're being unreasonable.
Yeah, don't go that way.
Don't, you know, just don't take too long.
Well, you also want, because you didn't do the announcement correctly, so this is equitable. We'll let you know too.
I probably would have, if we had seen this last month, I probably would have still given a little pushback about asking us to go through this all in this period of time and not look into it in more detail.
I understand that, and I appreciate that.
When did we receive all this?
Vaughn?
Most of it you got before the December meeting, and then we received, they sent in the other stuff that was received at the town, the 26th of January, I believe. And I was under the impression that you had actually gotten that supplemental material. I was mistaken about that.
So, we're not trying to be unreasonable.
No, I understand that, and I wasn't accusing you of that.
And great detail. I do appreciate the experts you brought and the information that you have, and the pictures and everything. But it is just a lot to digest.
And this is not the first cell tower we've approved in West
I understand.
I was fine with it. No.
So, do they want our questions prior to the next prior to our continuance next month?
I think it depends on who the questions are for, whether they're for the applicant, the landowner, and the neighboring residents.
If there are individual questions that have, the things you have questions about, I think we can probably manage the distribution of them.
Yeah, but right here, right now is not the time to do that.
Well, I don't think you have time to digest all that information.
Yeah, at some reasonable amount of time between now and then, I would just, caution you that if you are contemplating things, those things you contemplate be limited to the information that has been presented to you. And limit seeking outside sources of information that are not the ordinance.
So if we have a question, we can forward it to you. We ask one first.
If you have a question, you can forward it to me, and I'll be happy to answer it at the next meeting.
Okay.
And if it's something for any of the other parties here, we can forward it on to them so that they can be prepared. We'll forward all the questions on to all the parties, so that everybody understands any discussion. But like I said, just limit it to the information that has been, and testimony that's been provided so far, and we can, if you're not ready to make a decision tonight, you can keep the hearing open, which I think would probably be the best course of action, and reconvene. There's no further advertisement required, but I would recommend stating the time and place where you would reconvene the hearing.
So we will reconvene the hearing at our next council meeting, which is March the 8th at 7 p.m.
Fair enough. Just one question, and this might be for Vaughn. If this is still open, they can submit data to the town that will get onto the record?
If they would like to submit something for the record, they can.
Okay. So if you want an independent study, you have time to submit to the board.
30 days?
Well,
Our next meeting is March the 8th at 7 p.m.
so there might be a deadline before that, but you can.
30 days to do an independent study?
You got your time, is what I'm saying.
Wow. That's, I mean, let's be realistic. These guys have lots of money. They're spending it. You got lots of representation here. I can spend the money, but I don't think in 30 days anybody can do this. And I'm trying to prove what? That I want it to move a few feet over, that this spot isn't. I'm confused with what I've been trying to even prove. I said I'm not trying to fight the tower. I'm saying push it over a little bit and make Verizon pay the man a little bit more money. Damn it, they're making a lot of money on this thing. Push it over a little bit.
So
it might cost them a little more.
So what we asked for was to our next council meeting to review the information.
Right.
So if you have more information you want to present to us,
okay,
you have the same amount of time to come and present it to us when we continue the public hearing next time.
Okay. Thank you.
That's fair?
That's fair.
Would you like me to communicate with your attorney?
Please.
I think
Every time you do, it sends me a bill, but I do appreciate it.
I'm sure you need to make a motion.
Both.
Okay.
Great.
So apparently I need to make a motion to continue the public hearing to our next meeting, which is March 8th at 7 p.m. to give us time to give council time to review and digest the information we've been given tonight.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Y'all need a drink? So that brings us to Havoc. Considering the approval of Havoc. Approving the fee in lieu of $5,779.
Oh, you can say, well, you want to get her for this.
On? Thank you for waiting so patiently. And John, we're going to move you up next one. We'll get you.
Thank you, Mayor.
This one?
The developer of the Galveston subdivision submitted an application for final plat approval in November, and over the intervening months, village staff, consulting engineer, worked with his engineering folks to review the final plat and address any deficiencies. We did the final review of the outstanding items back in early January, and noted that it was addressed, and all required performance guarantees were submitted to the village. We moved it to the planning board, which held its hearing, and John referred to earlier in his statement at the beginning of the meeting last month. And of note, the planning board did recommend approval of the preliminary plat 3-2, and as you noted when some of you were there, a great deal of the discussion that led to that 3-2 vote was with regard to the entrance and the configuration and in general concerns about safety. It was noted that the planning board had voted in favor of the preliminary plat at the time of its original submission. So just in short, really, the final plat checklist requirements that Bonnie and I went through on notice of being complete. We had a lot of very extensive back and forth with Mr. McCourt, who is here tonight to answer any additional questions you will have. They did pay their required fee in lieu for the recreation fee. They have received those approvals that are necessary on the engineering side of things. And for those items that are not completed, they have delivered performance guarantees to the village clerk in the amounts that were agreed upon, and for those items that were agreed upon between the village's consulting engineer and their engineer. And so based upon that, again, the planning board recommendation for approval of final plat, staff also recommends that the council will approve the final plat and accept the improvement guarantees as certified by our service consultant. And I'd be happy to answer any questions for the board to answer any of you.
Do you want to say anything?
We started the design process in this subdivision, I think it was July or August of 2018. And as Jim said, at our first presentation to the planning board, there was a suggestion or request that we add some additional stacking lanes at the front entrance of the community. And I think I stated for the record at the time that we would love to have done it if we'd been aware of it at the time we began the process. But because of what you go through with the various outside agencies between NCDOT and Union County and whatever you're doing here internally, for us to go do that at that time would have basically required us to start a lot of resubmissions and start them all over. And anything that would make the community safer and better, we were definitely interested in doing, but that's not something that we could accomplish at that time. We still need our obligation to purchase the property. So I politely declined. Just that in the future we're open to any suggestions. We've been in business for 30 years. We have some great relationships with quite a few jurisdictions in the region, and that's generally how we do our business. Mr. Kummel brought up a couple of questions when we first got here early about the front entrance, that if he wants to, we'll be happy to go over those for further explanation if anyone's interested.
Just a quick question. This is the property on
Shamwood
on the west side?
Yes, sir. Well, depending which way you're going, of course.
Well, I'm looking at a map on the west side.
Yes, right.
Somebody said something about lots being on floodplain. Is that?
I don't know.
Or it was lots being, tree safe being on lots.
There was some tree sale.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I was thinking, we never do that. And so this neighborhood is caught right in the middle of us realizing that we needed to change a few things. One being tree save on lots, and one being the 3 lanes exit entrance. It's not this gentleman's fault that we came to these conclusions and changed them over after. But get ready for the HOA to have some headaches with that tree save on the individual lot. And that's how many lots is it?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
28. Joy.
5 that have tree save on them. Yeah, I'll add to what TJ said specifically about the exit lane. It is our fault for coming preliminary plat was approved, but we are not talking about a major subdivision. With only 28 lots, that's only going to come into effect on a sparse basis. If this was a subdivision like I live in, it's 143 homes, yeah, you might need that extra third lane to entrance and exit, or to exit left and right. But given only 28 lots, I don't see this as being a huge problem with this particular subdivision. Plus the fact, again, it's water under the bridge already, so.
I think the size of the subdivision and the street that's on makes a difference.
It does.
And we're learning, right?
Well,
Did we address the, go ahead.
And to add to your point, Mike, the states at Leslie Chapel, Leslie Oaks, the states at Leslie Oaks is less than a quarter of a mile from the entrance cabins. And it does not have the double lanes coming out. It only has a single lane. And there's in excess of 90 houses in that community. I don't think there's been a problem there as far as traffic backup. The only thing that I would ask Mr. Court to address would be just the street light that came up in the initial planning board discussions. What's been done with that, or if that is even an issue.
Well, what Joel requested and we agreed to was making sure that within some reasonable constraints that none of the light from that light pole at the in front of lot 13 at the top of the cul-de-sac fell onto the existing homeowner's rear yard. And part of the way that we're doing that is we're going to put in a shorter light pole and one that has essentially a shade on the top of it so it directs the light directly down the pavement as opposed to the typical street light that provides light in 360 degrees. So this will be a downward light on probably a 12-foot high pole instead of a 16 to 18 high pole right at the top of the cul-de-sac.
But the light will remain in the same location that it's indicated on here?
Yes.
Wouldn't it just be easier to move the light further from the property line?
Frankly, I can't remember why it was there, but I think there was a specific requirement on why it's located where it is.
There's some distance requirements.
Right. There would have been too big of a gap between the separation between the next light down the roadway.
Have the lights already been installed?
All the underground's in there. Really, the only thing on the utility side is basically the outside gas at this point.
Any further questions, council? You don't have a question.
Are we considering just the approval of the final plan?
I think we probably need to do them individually.
Oh, and Vaughn, would you tell me what the PLU is on this property?
I'm sorry.
The dollar amount of the PLU?
It's right in the agenda.
So let's do them as individual motions, just to make sure.
Okay. I'll make a motion we approve the final plan of counts.
I'll second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, was everybody aware, this is what we were talking about before the meeting started, of the entryway and the additional easement? Say this is the road going through, this is the property line, this is the road that goes in and out of the subdivision. But this monument has been added, there's been an additional easement added to the side of the property. Is everybody aware of that? I'm seeing a nod from David, and I'm seeing stares from.
I saw that. I'm not following you.
That this was added. This was the original property line, and then this space over here was added as a permanent easement.
Permanent landscaping and maintenance easement. So it gives us the right to put the entrance structures and the landscaping, part of which is a buffer that, and this was an easement agreement with the existing landowner who retained 10 acres and still lives back there. So this was kind of a quid pro quo. We needed to have a little more of an elegant front entrance, and we're providing a landscape buffer in there as well.
So originally her driveway went right through here. They relocated the driveway out to the side and this landscape easement for the entryway.
Yeah. Learning all about easements too.
Because what shows here is not what shows pointed out, so you know what you're looking for. But I have no issues with it.
All in favor?
Yep.
Make a motion to approve the fee in lieu of $5,739.92 for gas.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Any objections, John?
All right, and the bonds, do we just make a motion to approve the bonds? Is that enough?
My motion.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you for your patience.
I'd like to thank Carol and Vaughn for the things and I've never gone through this process before. It was,
Always
the next one will go a lot better, I promise.
We'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
All right,
Can we adjourn for
I'll give you a 3-minute break. So I'll start the time now. Mark, set break. Anybody have a plan? So we will resume. Thank you all for making that quick. That gets us down to the introduction to community survey results. I'm going to turn it over to Vaughn, just so everybody knows. March the 1st at 7 p.m. We need to either call for a special meeting or amend the meeting schedule. All the committees were notified, from Parks and Rec, Planning Board to Communications to whoever. Everybody's notified of this meeting. And I'll make Cheryl, I'll ask Cheryl kindly to send out a reminder about 2 weeks prior, a week prior. I guess I've got it is 2 weeks, maybe a week prior to remind everybody about the meeting. So do we want to call for a special meeting or amend our meeting schedule?
As much as I hate it, I think we should have a special meeting for the survey questions, just because of the nature of it, considering how long we live tonight for public hearing, and I don't know what else is going to be on the agenda in March.
So we'll call for a special meeting on March the 1st at 7 p.m. Yeah. Well, Bob's okay with coming back for that day, right, Bob?
Yeah.
Is that all I need to do is call for a special meeting? Do we have to vote on
Yeah, I mean, whether you call for a special meeting or amend your regular meeting schedule, there's practically no difference. It's still going to be a meeting just for this.
So do we have to vote on that, or I can call?
Yeah, I think you do, right? Because it's not part of your...
The mayor can call for a special meeting.
Yeah, that's true.
Or you can just amend your meeting schedule, whichever.
Okay. I'm just going to call for a special meeting on March 1st at 7 p.m. Y'all be there.
Does that cover us if we have a one?
I will find out who's having a quorum, and I'll put out notice. And I will be asking you then to call for a special meeting if you have a quorum.
All right, so Vaughn, is there anything you would like to add?
Just why we're calling for a special meeting, when I originally gave the draft results to the mayor, I think she inquired with me, how long, be able to do this at the next meeting, how long it might take, and I said, well, based on my experience with similar surveys, and the length of this is probably about 2 hours, and I don't think we want to be doing this at midnight tonight. And so I suggested we have a meeting specifically to go over the survey results, if that was desired. I guess you've all had them for at least a couple of weeks now, maybe. And really, if there are any questions about anything in the survey prior to the meeting, please feel free to either email me, email Cheryl, or call me, or whatever. I'd be happy to go through the results with you. My plan for that evening really would be to pretty much go through the results and summarize any key takeaways that we came up with from it. But if there are particular areas of interest to you, I know it's a long survey, and I know why kind of like each question was asked. But if there are some that are maybe more important to you, and I kind of can surmise what some of those might be. But if there's anything you'd like me to focus on or add additional detail to during the presentation, or explain the answers, or come up with some kind of analysis of maybe what that particular result might mean, I'd be happy to look at that before the next meeting.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Is there ability to kind of cross-correlate between the questions, such that, like, you know,
Who, yeah.
within the demographics, who's saying they'll do a tax increase, or the people that said tax increase was comparable to the other places we have a tax increase. That type of analysis, I was wondering, instead of just, here's the result.
If the survey software that was used is somewhat new to me, and I haven't had a lot of time to really dig into the back end of it, and its online platform is kind of clunky and doesn't function very well. So we have some ability to manipulate the data in the online platform. It's probably a little bit easier for us to manipulate it offline and after we extracted it. But that makes since we don't take the time to write the scripts to do that kind of analysis a little bit longer, we can't. Unfortunately, I tried to see if we could upload the results back into the platform that we usually use, and we can't. There's no import function that we can use with it. So unfortunately, we can't do that. So we did the best we could to take it out. If there are any particular questions you'd like, that you had a specific question about like that, we'd be happy to try and get an answer for you.
Yeah, my biggest question was like, with the software even allowing you that type of analysis? So I will look at it, but and think about it as a manual effort.
Yeah, I can do some more exploration of that, but we might be able to. If it's a narrow enough question, we might be able to answer it for you. There's about correlation between.
Almost like seeing the results by where people live, or southeast or west, or something, So if y'all will get maybe these questions or comments to Ron maybe by the midweek next week, so that still gives him a week and a half. Is that okay, Ron? Does that try to give him to the 17th? Yes, sir.
This sounds, the special meeting you talk about, it sounds similar to what we've done in the past with what we call advanced, right? How we treat advanced. Is this what we're talking about? Is maybe something in lieu of that, or do we have plans for advanced any time in the future?
Not right now. I'm a little concerned that we're going to have too many people here. So, no, this is really just to focus on the survey results.
But John, to answer your question, in the past we have had surveys done in a calendar year, and it's because we've done a survey, we've foregone the retreat. One or the other.
Okay. So the thing that there is a lot of, we had talked after the last exam about doing something in a different format, like hot dogs at town hall, or like something more casual to try to get more people in, maybe a longer window, than a formal event, but COVID, right? So this is just a special meeting to focus on the survey results and whoever wants to come and listen. I think it's really important that we walk away from this survey with very concise statements, elevator pitch, that we can all stand behind and say, this is what these residents have said. Right? We've referenced it in the past from the last survey, but like tonight with the sheriff, for example, that we can say, our population is 50-50 on a tax increase. Therefore, we'll choose to do whatever. But just that we are able to summarize it to that extent and not, dicker back and forth and half of us say one thing, half say another. And I think we do have to be realistic about the statistical significance of this result based on the participation that we have.
Okay. I was actually pulling up a sample size calculator. I hadn't done it yet, but I will tell you your sample size and your confidence interval.
Yeah. Because even though it doesn't seem like a large number, it does not take a large number of survey results to be statistically significant for the population.
So it's close to 95% confidence with plus or minus 4% margin of error based on your population, and probably about 3.5. So I mean, it's about statistically significant. I mean, it's a pretty good survey result for the sheer number you got.
It's as good as any of the CNN polls.
Well, yeah, probably. Yeah, I will say that, the amount of participation that you got, I mean, it took a long time,
Yeah.
but the amount of participation you got made it, pretty good survey, and there's some pretty steady kind of trends you can see through there. And, so I think, I would believe the results.
Because the last prior council just kept saying, oh, but it wasn't many people, oh, that was this, that was that, and I'm just done with that kind of conversation, frankly.
And the distribution, the age distribution and the length of residence seems to probably correlate pretty well with your general demographic makeup. And so I'll be able to speak to that a little more when we talk. But
Obviously, there's very questions.
Well, I think the tax questions are important. Like if there's overwhelming support for tax increase, that's a different conversation than if there's overwhelming, don't you ever dare think about it.
So y'all get your questions to Vaughn about next week. And then we'll hopefully stand by them first. Anything else on or? So that takes us down to John, Park and Rec report.
It's only an hour late, John.
John, I'll send you Park next month, okay?
So we had a meeting Thursday, January 28th. It was a special meeting because we forgot to approve the schedule of meetings for 2021 at the prior meeting. So it was a special meeting. We have now proposed and approved a schedule of meetings for 2021. So we kind of stuck to the agenda. There was one issue raised in public comments that we've deferred to our next meeting. It's a pretty important topic, and that is parking at the park. Since we've installed the playground, we are frequently, if the sun shines, at or beyond parking capacity. So that's going to be an agenda item at our next meeting, what our options are. They're basically free. Send signs to the overflow parking, which is on the CUP plan, which is a grassed area, and do nothing other than put the sign up. Maybe put some drainage surface on there, gravel, and put a sign up, or maybe longer term, even consider adding additional parking. We're going to talk about that. So the things we did talk about, we talked about events in 2021, vis-a-vis the COVID situation, and we're all pretty confident not to be planning anything anytime soon. However, we know we've got some event budget left in this budget year cycle, and we had 1 million plus people being vaccinated every day, and 15, 20 million people already had it and recovered, and they had some immunity. There's a possibility things on outdoor events might open up a little before the end of June. So what we thought was better to have a plan in place for an event and cancel it if things don't change, than for things to open up and not have time to plan an event. So we're planning to go ahead and scope out an event from mid-June, June 19th is the date we proposed, knowing full well if things don't open up, we don't do it. Only if it's safe and if the guidelines allow. So we're going to go ahead and work on at least penciling it in and thinking about it.
John, can I interrupt you for a second? Sure. While I see you walking out the door, one thing I was going to ask you to do, or to do it for you, was actually send us all the contact information related to the cell phone tower, all the parties involved.
No, you need to direct your questions to Vaughn. You don't need to be calling everybody. Because the public hearing is still open. So any questions you have, you need to send to Vaughn.
And because it's a CUP.
And it's a CUP.
If you have questions, if you'd like for them to be prepared to answer something, I will
All right,
pass
I'll
pass them on.
the questions I would have asked the people.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, John.
All right, no problem. So we didn't get into any details of the event other than what the date could be, we know we've got a budget for it, we took some from that tonight, but we still got enough money to pull off an event. We're going to be scoping that at the next meeting, and so council are planning warning of what we're planning, but I just wanted to let you guys know, we're thinking let's get ready for an event, hoping everything opens up and we're able to go forward. We'd rather be prepared than not prepared. We did spend a lot of time talking about the long-range plan and improvements at the park, something Laurie had indicated you guys would like to see. I think Cheryl got that to all you guys. And I mentioned last time I talked to you guys, generally the principle is let's focus on what we already got, let's maintain what we got, let's fix what we got as the priorities, and adding things come later. And we tried to break it out, and we were pretty unanimous in the groups. There was some disagreement about exactly where in a particular group something should go. But we kind of broke it down into what we thought were manageable chunks over the next, I think, 5 or 6 budget years. So we hope you now have a long view, whether you're on council or not, but you know, future councils will have a long-term view of the things that have been discussed in the past, now all lined out on a timeline.
So, one question.
Yes.
So, when I look at this and see, I just want to make sure I got the right basis, right? Everything on here is new. Right, these are new costs we've incurred. So whatever we're incurring now for landscaping costs, for example, you aren't putting in increases for that landscaping cost. You're saying that cost will stay, but if we do this new item, then there's this cost. So this is just the new stuff.
Correct. Those are improvements or things planned going forward. That it doesn't address what is addressed in the normal budget, the maintenance, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
All right. So is that clear?
Yeah, because I was wondering, like, I see, you know, like, you have a security camera system. Well, if we do the security camera system, then there's going to be ongoing maintenance related to the security camera system.
Correct.
And those
that's just the installation of security.
Right. So I think that's the piece, is like understanding some order of magnitude. It's 10%, it's 5%, you know, something like that, because that's going to add to that ongoing cost. So we'll do these improvements, our maintenance budget will go up as we do improvements, full visibility and long-term plan thinking.
Sure. As your asset base grows, your maintenance cost is going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. But we always think these properly.
All right. The other thing we talked about with the playground rules, David, you'd asked us, or you got another question on that?
I've got a question about the long-term plan. You've got a line item in here, tractor and tools for a park maintenance employee, but there's no cost associated with an employee.
Correct. In this year's budget, when we propose it, as we have done in the past, we'll provide you with a comparison of the contract we're currently paying versus the cost of having an employee. What I think we will show, as how many times have we shown this now, Mike? 3, 4, 5 times? Over a 5-year period, it appears that if we invest that capital in the equipment, over a 5-year period, it will be cheaper to bite the bullet, buy the equipment and have an employee than it is to spend money on the contract. The cost of that employee would replace what we're currently spending on a contractor. And what I think we'll show again is the net effect of that, spending that money now, and in 5 years not spending money on a contract but spending on an employee will be less over the 5-year period than we're doing right now.
Got that. And then are we looking at doing any major changes to the operations of the playground? Because right now it's open just during daylight hours. So there's a lot in here for playground lighting. Why would we need lighting if it's only open during daylight hours?
That's correct. So we've come up with a different solution for that. If we have an event at night, one of the complaints we've had about having an event at night, nothing for the kids to do. But that was before we had a playground. Now if we do an event after dark, We do have something for kids to do if we could light it. But instead of having permanently installed lighting, we're thinking temporary battery-powered floodlights, which would be way less expensive than a permanent solution. That answer the question?
It does. Thank you.
Any more questions on the 5-year outlook?
So I'll point out one thing that you already know, but I don't think the rest of the council here. The one thing I was shocked about was the sequence on security cameras. We've gotten the quotes originally on the security cameras back in 2019.
We did.
And now we're pushing it out to 2024.
We have. That was the consensus in the committee.
And that is being pushed back over like RV power supplies for food trucks and additional park furniture and tree replacement, landscaping, irrigation system. Just to me, that didn't make sense. I thought we had originally agreed with security cameras or something. We wanted higher up on the priority list.
I think you and I were thinking that, Mike, but when we put it to the committee, we discussed it, and we went round the table and discussed with everybody, where do you think these things should lie on the priority list? And everybody...
And restrooms. Restrooms are all the way down to 2026.
What is?
Restrooms.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it makes sense, because it looks like the committee is focusing on ensuring what we have is taken care of, and having a good solid foundation and base, and then, going up from there.
And the restrooms are pushed out that far because it's such a huge ticket item, number one.
Yeah.
And this is going to come up when we discuss the survey, which we're going to discuss at our next meeting. When the survey was being prepared, I pushed Robin a lot to say, look, you can't just ask the question, should we put the community centre at the town hall or at the park, without providing people the background. And the background is that PARDEF will not give you any money towards the restroom. So if we decide to do a restroom at the park, we already know we've got quotes several years ago, $250,000 for a restroom. And we get no help from PARDEF. So if you put a community centre here, $800,000, you got another $250,000 for a restroom at the park. If you have the community centre at the park with restrooms that can be accessed from the outside, you have an $800,000 community centre for which you can get $400,000 grant money. So, Robin said that's far too complicated. People won't understand it. And I'm like, well, you're going to get the wrong answer if you just say, where should we put a community centre?
But if you also have residents who say they don't want a tax increase, it's not going to be an $800,000 community.
I get it. But it'd be a $400,000 plus $400,000 grant.
But if you built a $800,000 community center here, we could get a PARDEF grant?
Yeah. True.
Okay, so, okay.
And I will say that...
But you'd still have $250,000 cost if you ever wanted to put restrooms in the park. So
That's why we spend $300
it's
a
way
month.
off because it's a huge expense, and I personally don't see any problem with the porta johns. When
And I
you
was gonna
service
say,
regularly,
we're having problems with parking. We have bathrooms, people are going to stay longer.
yeah.
Or not just the bathrooms.
So, I mean, I think that it makes sense for it to be part
If
of
you
it.
guys want to change the level, go ahead. I mean,
No, I think it makes sense. I agree.
I think we fulfilled the request, which is give us what Parks and Rec see as a long-term outlook, what it's going to cost, and show us the horizon. So we've tried to do.
Thank you.
All right. The other thing that came up, we were talking last time I spoke to you guys. We were talking about playground rules. David said, "I want the committee to talk about it." Amy was tasked with gathering a bunch of rules from other parks around, put those together for us. We thought some of them were way too wordy, way too complicated, and some of them completely unnecessary. Things like play safely, no push-ins. So basically, we went through with the aim of focusing on the important things we want people to do. Fully aware we got nobody to enforce any of these rules. We know we've had issues with pets inside the playground, we've got litter issues, lost and, people leaving stuff in the playground. So what we try to do is make the wording as succinct as possible so we can end up using a big font when we print it. And we edited those, you've been sent those, that's what we are proposing as rules for the park. The suggestion is we get 3 weather-resistant signs made. We put one on the notice board at the entrance, and we display 2 others somewhere inside the park mounted on the fence. Just so if somebody's in there smoking, somebody can point to the sign and say, hey, no smoking. Or somebody's in there with a dog that's doing what it shouldn't be doing, they can point to the sign and say, hey, you ain't supposed to do that. So I guess is the ask is, there's our recommendation. If you guys approve it, we'll go ahead and get the quotes to get 3 signs made and then come back to you guys and ask you for the money.
My question was, glass items are allowed inside the playground. Are we okay with glass items in the park? Just a broader question. Are we really? I think it's a rule in the park.
Why no glass in the playground?
Glass items in the park in general.
We do, but it's more likely you have a lot of little kids running around without the shoes on, they take the shoes off and they run around the playground than in the park.
But we do not have a rule about no glass in the park.
No, I don't believe we do.
Okay. I mean, that was my question. That seems like a good idea, but.
People come picnicking, we've only had one issue where right by the flagpole, somebody took a beer bottle and just smashed it down on the bricks, but.
No, we've had broken beer balls down at the amphitheater as well.
Yeah.
I picked up the glass from the
Yeah,
amphitheater.
you can probably trace the source of those broken beer bottles.
And those are not,
Consistent behaviors.
those are not kids that are there during the day when the park's open, it's usually at night. It's
And like I said,
cameras.
we got nobody to enforce them, but we want to give people some guidelines on what's reasonable and not reasonable for the playground. And if somebody wants to police the rules themselves, they'll be able to point to the sign and say, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that.
My only suggestion would be keep the gate closed at all times, closer to the top, like maybe number 2, so the children have to be supervised at the gate.
Mike thought the order wasn't right, and I'm not suggesting that's the order we want them in. I don't care what order they're in, and I don't think anybody in Parks and Rec cares what order they're in.
We're doing the same thing. I renumbered these, and I was going to have Amy just retype it up with them in a different sequence. So that's one, children must be supervised at all times, is number 1. Keep gate closed at all times should be number 2. Pets are not permitted inside the playground area, number 3. No smoking, number 4. And then we talk about glass items and litter, footwear, and skateboards, hand sanitizer. The bottom ones didn't seem really, most people aren't going to read that far down, but I thought the top ones should be the children, the pets, and the keeping the gate.
I would just say I would think appropriate footwear maybe should be higher than no smoking, but.
Yeah.
The over.
Although, people look at the appropriate.
We have a bigger problem, I think, with smoking than we do with being barefoot.
The overall park rules include no glass bottles, and they also specify that it's a tobacco-free park.
So, because the reason I'm saying that is like you got the general rules for the park, we don't have to repeat them at the playground because they're the general rules for the park.
Well, for example, the pets inside the playground area, we allow pets in the park.
Right, we don't want you in here.
Right.
We don't want inside the pets. So, if you guys are okay with it, I'll submit this to Amy and have her retype it up before the sign gets made.
Yeah, I have no preference about what order the rules go in, just so long as those rules are in what Parks and Rec agreed to or in.
Works for me. Do I have a motion to approve these rules as reordered?
Second.
Thank you, folks.
As far as the sign, do we already have that in the budget?
Yeah, it's a matter of $100. It doesn't even need.
I don't think we do have $100. We're running awful tight.
We'll give Cheryl a second to take a look at the budget, but we need to, because you want to get this printed out in the park, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Cheryl,
Are you saying like a sign like we used for the COVID?
Yes, something like that.
Those,
But instead of being portrait, landscape orientation,
okay.
instead of being landscape portrait.
That'll probably be about 100, yeah.
So do we have that in the budget, Cheryl?
Not currently, no.
It's not in the budget. but-
Nothing that, we don't have anything that would fall under?
No.
Maintenance or improvements or?
Other materials.
The other supplies and materials now, I just placed an order for the doggy bags, and that account's done. It's spent.
Okay, well, follow the money.
If we have to, we'll print it on paper for now, and we'll put it in next year's budget, or we'll take it out of events. We'll ask you to move something from somewhere to cover that small expense.
Yeah, I would suggest in the next budget to put in monies to replace all these various things we put in, signs, sanitizer stations, and everything else that, you know, we just need a line item to replace them if they aren't gonna last, so.
Winter housing, not winter housing.
Yeah.
All right, and John, I'll send this over to you.
Right, so that was basically the other things I wanted to waste your time about, muskrats and that kind of stuff.
How many have we got?
We got 3 muskrats and then they went dormant. He said he's going to have to come back when they're more active again. It is out of season, as Cheryl pointed out, but he said it's okay, he can get a special nuisance license to track them.
It is Valentine's weekend, we can keep that on.
So it's something we're going to have to, again, plan for going forward. We're going to have to maybe have some kind of animal control budget, whether it's beavers that may come back, muskrats. We know it's either a coyote or a fox den in the park. We've had the dead deer issues.
I saw the coyote the other night.
I was in the park.
I think it's a really good idea to think about animal control, pest control, critter control, whatever you want to call it. Because, you know, it is a natural habitat and they think it's home just like we think about ourselves. But do muskrat, this is just a question I'm not going to answer. I know beavers tend to be very social animals and they'll live in a den with, you know, a couple of generations of their cubs and pups or whatever they are. Are muskrats similar to that or are muskrats more?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have dens and they like to build dens. That's the problem we have with the fountain. They think a really nice place to build their den is on top of our fountain, which is not a good place.
Good circulation.
They're loving animals.
It feels like a river.
They're loving animals.
Well, thank you.
Muskrat Susie, muskrat Sam.
I appreciate you waiting.
Next month we're going to talk parking options. We're going to go over the survey results and what we think they mean, the Parks and Rec section, and get something back to you guys. And we're going to be working on scoping out a potential June 19 event should we be allowed under restrictions to host an event. But we're figuring no Easter event, no Easter egg hunt, nothing until.
And I would suggest, because I think June is going to be unlikely too, but that when you're doing your scoping, you think about, okay, we could do it in June, but what if we also did it in September? Like, if you couldn't do it in June instead of plan, you could then say perhaps September without too much extra effort. You thinking like that?
And if we plan it for June and we don't pull it off,
Well, that's what I mean. The plan that you come up with for June, is it something you could?
that's the idea.
Okay, that's all good.
And then if we're allowed to do one in June, we'll just plan another event in the fall. That'll go into next year's budget. We were focused on this year's budget with the June 19.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. All right, so the next item is any changes to operating procedures due to the pandemic. I don't see any, so we're just going to pass on along to contract administration and review of rules 1 to 10, the rules of procedure.
Yeah, contract administration, there's an item in the rules of procedure later on in the review something about contract agreements and all. I thought that would be a great place to add in piece about contract management. So I'll add that in whenever we get to that section for review.
Okay, and then I did go over some of this with Cheryl, and she did talk to me about how some of this is from the statutes. So I had the book.
You had the book.
From the statutes and not just department.
Oh, I think it was based on what I can think of.
I had the book. I stole the book. In the order also that's kind of following apparently
There was some sequencing thing that really didn't make sense to me. And also, my printed copy was whacked out when you got to about 31.
What happened?
It's whacked out, the pages aren't right. And there's stuff that's, and I had to go to the website to read the last rules.
So do you need a new copy?
Oh, I was okay, I figured it out. But it was just a copier glitch.
Okay.
So I read through them, I didn't see anything like glaring aside from Lori's suggestion. The section that I was really concerned about, we haven't hit on yet. But everybody reviewed Lori's,
Changes all seem to make sense.
feedback.
Yeah. I mean, basically, and it's got like, and it was not good, some of the numbering was not consistent on the different levels, so it's just a cleanup item. You know, we have a new title, clerk finance officer, so we should reflect that. The other one is like when it's on regular meetings, it lists legal holiday, there's no such thing as a legal holiday. I think we were probably referring to federal holidays, which I know we have meetings on federal holidays, so I'm not really sure why we even have legal holidays here. But if we're going to reference holidays, I think it should be federal holidays.
I think it meant town holiday.
Maybe we should say village or
Well, but yeah, this is legal, so.
We used to have a problem where we, trying to think, I think it was Veterans Day maybe, and we always had it was a town holiday for employees, but then we'd have a council meeting, and that wasn't much of a holiday.
If you say federal holiday, Veterans Day is a federal holiday, it has to be rescheduled. So if that's a village holiday and federal holiday, we can have a meeting.
Well, I mean, if it's a legal holiday, like we don't observe Martin Luther King Day as a town holiday, so there's no problem with having a meeting.
I'm just saying legal holiday doesn't really have a definition, so we just need to be more specific. But if we say village holiday, then we need a calendar on the website or somewhere that says these are the recognized holidays.
We'll have it in the personnel policy.
Do we need a motion to approve the changes?
I've got a few questions.
So on the holiday, I just think it has to be more than
Legal.
buried somewhere. But it needs to say, like, these are the village holidays and town hall's closed. None of them are rules, right? The next item was about, just, you know, making sure we adopt the calendar at the last meeting of the year, because we had two committees that didn't do that, so I think I was like, maybe we should put that in our own, we seem to be pretty good, but.
I've talked to them before. It just slipped by.
The difference is we don't think we had a Parks and Rec meeting in December or November.
Right.
So we didn't think about it in October, 2 months left in the year.
Right.
But would we put it in here or put it in there?
See, they don't look at these rules
No,
necessarily.
these are ours, but it seemed like the same should apply to us, that we have some standards for ourselves. Because I can envision us then taking these rules and procedures and adding up and saying, these are planning board rules and procedures, and these are committee rules and procedures.
Planning Board and Board of Adjustment already have their own rules and procedures. I don't know that these would be necessarily transferable.
Do they really?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Committees don't.
Yeah, they would want to adopt their own, or changes to them, if they've already got them in
Or
place.
council,
And then the special meeting ones, I know, I think that was ones.
The special meeting was, it still says in there about leaving it at our houses, and I just think that's unnecessary because we're just doing everything digital. I think we could just delete that language.
For the one about the calendar, adopted at the last meeting of the year and no later than 7 days prior to the first meeting of the year.
Just trying to make sure it gets published in some sort of timely manner, that's all. And the way some of it was worded, it sounded like here's our calendar, and then if there's a change, we have to publish it. When we give it to the clerk, and then if we publish it, it's got to be 7 days or something. It was something wonky in just the way it was written.
And that's all statute.
But I mean, it may be in the statute, but the way it was written, it seemed kind of redundant, which I think that was meant to be, you've got your standard calendar, and then if you make any change to it, then that has to be filed separately. I think that was, at least my reading yesterday, I read it. Rule 7 on the organizational meeting, it is great to have a separate organizational meeting. I was just saying, should we just say that there's just no other business at that meeting except the oath and the...
Back to number 6. Did you go over number 6?
Rule number 6 was just saying we just delete taking documents to our houses.
And that's in the
It's
statutes.
in the fact, those exact words are in here.
Yeah. All of this mostly came out of that book.
Well, I think they're out there, but okay.
There is one thing I'd like to add to rule number 6, and I think it's rule number 6, it speaks to emergency meetings. And, you know, there was a real short time window there from the time that it was
6 hours.
6 hours, and it said, the information could be shared with council either via email or a phone call. Some of us don't check our emails every 6 hours, so I would request that be a phone call and an email.
Yeah, I think if somebody drove a truck in front of the town hall, we had to get the town hall repaired, you know, that would be an emergency.
It's an emergency meeting, but it
And
would
there would
be
be a
tomorrow
phone-
before I check my email.
A phone call and an email.
Yes, that's all.
Yeah,
I agree.
basically flip the order. Telephone and email.
I guess we can make it more strict than the statute.
Yeah, I think so. You just can't be let, yeah.
You vote.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just agreeing with Jane, like, do telephone as an emergency and do an email.
But you still have by email and by telephone or left at their dwelling place?
We're not allowed to take out the dwelling place.
That's,
I mean, if that's in the,
That's in-
if that's in the statute, then,
Yeah.
yeah, you could, that's what Cheryl and I were just saying, is, you know, you can be more restrictive.
You
or
can't be allowed.
This
can't
is
be
the
let,
latest
right?
version.
this is a very new book, yes.
2017.
Can we jump back to rule number 7?
Sure.
Is the first meeting in December going to be only the organizational meeting? or-
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, there's a reason, remember they did their
True, yeah, I understand, but then will every council meeting in December be a special meeting?
No, because on the regular calendar, you have your standard meetings at Monday.
Oh.
There's 2 meetings then.
All right.
But we only have organizational meetings on the years, there's, so that brings us to number 8.
And what I was looking at is like, you know, the timing of the Parks and Rec Committee and everything else. It's obvious, the stuff is coming out before they've even met, and yet it's an agenda item, and we don't always get the materials or anything else, and then it's not part of the package, and then therefore it's not on the website in the same place, and these extra emails, and it's not out there. So if we're trying to put out an agenda, and here's the backup documentation to the website, we can't have half the information coming in after that gets posted. And so I felt like if we made it so where that there's 5 full business days, because Friday is a business day, that makes first thing Monday morning, everything should be in hand that's needed, and that would make sure we have Parks and Rec information, finance information, deputy report for the prior month. Everything can be in that package and goes out for distribution and posted to the website. So
Yeah, it started off as 2 weeks, so it got reduced down. Because originally there was, this goes back 7 years, there was stuff that the last minute would just spring up on your desk when you walked in, and we didn't consider that.
I think 5 days is enough if you get it. I mean, one of the first things I do is I look at the agenda and see if there's anything we need to ask questions about, and I'll do that first. But to me, it's more valuable to have all of the information in the package, so when I do my first review, I've got everything, than it is to get it in like 3 or 4 different emails.
So if you have it 5 days ahead, when would you expect to
You
receive
have
it?
it Monday morning, the week before council meeting. Because it says
To me or to you?
to you.
Okay, and then when would you expect I would get it to you?
Well, now it's due to you, it's at 7 days, so how long does it take you once everything
Some days some weeks it takes 5 days.
For you to turn it around?
Yes, because people give me items and say, here, I want to do this, write a resolution, research this, do an agenda item. And I get it from different directions, and it's a big job.
Because that doesn't match, that's not matching up with how I'm thinking I received, the time that I received the information.
Because I've been working on it for a week.
We do normally talk about the agenda for several days before it comes out.
But this says, the current thing says 7 full business days before the council meeting. Council's on Monday, so it's the Thursday, 2 Thursdays before council meeting that everything's due to you. And then you're saying it's 5 days before you send it to us, which would mean we're going to get it midweek, the week before council meeting.
We generally go 2 weeks before the council meeting, so I start getting things like for this meeting back on January 25th.
And then we got everything on the
29th and the 1st, maybe?
The timing of our meeting doesn't sync with that because we're the 4th Thursday of the month.
Right. The day if I'm not looking at the calendar, over half the time, materials have to be to Cheryl before you even have your meeting.
Correct.
But when they
You're
have,
not ever going to consistently have all the information.
but they have their meeting on Thursday.
Uh-huh.
Amy doesn't work on Friday. Who's going to get that information to me?
Well, it would come in email or ever how it's,
From John?
But it better be in hand Monday morning when you start working.
From the chairman?
From anybody.
So Amy does it.
Amy does the,
Oh, now we have to know you part.
So she doesn't work on Friday.
Is Amy at the meeting on Thursday night?
Thursday night, yeah.
she takes the minutes and stuff.
I mean, it's,
Is that part of her standard work hours?
She'll normally take a little more lunch or something, or as something comes up, she kind of flexes it out.
And I guess I've just not seen documentation coming from Amy, everything I think I'd like to get from John.
Sometimes we ask Amy to do follow for us, and then that won't get attended to till the following week. So if it's an agenda request or send some documents.
Yeah, like I said, I would like to be able to get all the information at once, and I do think that we have an obligation to put all the information on the website, which I don't think we're doing.
I do. Oh, I do.
Did you add to that package? Like when John sends us an email or the deputy report?
Well, I
comes
mean,
out?
if deputy reports would never put on. It's not official backup for the meeting.
Even though it's a report.
And I mean, if somebody sends an email, I don't put the email on the website.
All right, well, we can still think on that one, marinate on it everyone, and bring it back up again. Because the other option is to move Parks and Rec meeting day. They're obviously not going to do because it's not on their calendar.
For a while, Park and Rec met the third week. Is that not a good one?
I could ask them.
I thought communications meant the third week.
They have been, but before that, Park and Rec did.
I thought communications was the third Thursday and they were the fourth Thursday.
But they used to be the third Thursday.
If they wanted to do
But we can't have two meetings at the same time.
No, we can't do that. And that's when, there was one of your meetings on the Park and Rec agenda that's the third week in November or something. It was the same week as communications. I told them.
November because
Amy.
Communications Committee have a meeting there. We apparently can't have 2 meetings here at the same time. I've been told.
Because if the resident wants to hear that,
It's somewhere in these rules of procedure.
read it politely. All right, y'all marinate on that. Think about some options. Post it to the village website to make more available. I think that's fine. We have been to drop detail on that. Edit to indicate it must be
Unanimous for the I just remember when we went to training last year, it was something about the consent agenda has to be unanimous, and it just doesn't call that out in the wording.
There's an item here about consent agenda on page 5.
It says it's voted on, but it doesn't say,
Well, it says any member may remove an item from the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda.
it still doesn't say you need unanimous vote to approve the consent agenda.
Oh, you don't?
That's what we were told we had to.
It's just the quorum, not everything else.
Gosh.
I got stuck once where
Yeah, what Lori is saying rings a bell, but it's possible it was changed. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can find out.
Yeah, okay, we'll find out before the next meeting about.
Okay.
Adoption of the agenda. Well, I mean, this is 2017, so I'm a little worried.
Yeah,
that
4 years
it
now.
might not
It's
be.
gone. I feel like it's yesterday.
Just because so much stuff has happened in the last consent agenda. They may be placed if considered non-controversial routine. It doesn't say here, it doesn't say.
And the reason it really, there was a few things in that trade that really stood out to me, and that was one of them, because there was some conversation about it, of people like, well, what if I don't agree with it? No, it has to be unanimous for the consent agenda to pass. Which I think people get around when they remove an item, and then everybody's okay with it.
Well, so we'll look on that.
We'll
for
find
the
out.
for the next meeting. All right, David, did you have anything else? Mike, did you have anything? Okay, so your homework assignment is to review, let's see, their notified rule.
Well, I will say that there's 35 rules, except you should not count the number 24 procedural motions, like one page, it's a separate page.
All right,
So all the various motions, and then I would say, if they are straight out of, if there's any sections in there that are straight out of statute, we shouldn't look at that.
so we'll just
But I know they are.
well, we still need to read them. So then we'll-
Yeah, we do, I'm just saying, I wouldn't treat number 24 as a short item, because it's so many motions.
So let's do 11 to 23. And we'll review and see if procedural motions is staying, I think straight on the statute before we get to the 24. Well, because we're going to find out if this is what it is. All right, so that's your homework assignment. That brings us to the panhandling issue. Brendan did check with Aston. Aston does not want panhandlers, so he says he runs them off whenever he sees them. I saw them at Blakeney the other day. David, were you wanting an ordinance? Like, where were you feeling this should go?
I'm not sure. I think just dialogue maybe more than anything else. You're right. Brandon did say that Aspen was not one, and they given them total authority to run them all. But
typically they don't come back, right?
that one does not.
That day.
The other one in the car does the next day. Yes, yeah. I don't know. Cheryl had sent me, I think, a proposed ordinance that the previous councilor talked about. I don't know that we want to get into writing a whole ordinance, but by the same regard, I travel a lot, and it's really easy to see the communities that have no guidelines and no ordinances against this type of business, if you will. So I don't know what I'm looking for.
Well, I've seen it at Target, I've seen it at Harris Teeter, but I've only seen it like 3 times in the last 5 years.
And both of the shopping centers are Aston. And so, I mean, have we seen them elsewhere? Have we seen them like at the park or any random?
I've seen it in Wellington, the Harris Teeter down in Wellington.
But they're not at an intersection.
I mean, they're just at the shop.
In every shopping center, like everybody at the grocery store, big sign that says, lost my job, got 5 kids.
You're talking about the guys that play music, the violin player, and why don't we just go play for tips in the amphitheater?
They'll be paying them like in the park.
Here they come.
Don't tell them.
Yeah.
Strike that.
Yeah, not even about that idea.
That did not come up.
But I would say if Aston has told Brandon they don't want them there, see how that affects it. And maybe Aston needs to tell the stores, hey, we don't want this. Call the deputy.
Yeah. But, I mean, to that point, if Panhandler show up at the park, do we have any legal means to say you guys can't be here?
With
The guy throws out a guitar and starts playing, puts out his bucket.
Yeah.
We have kids going in the park and playing
Say,
instruments, we have
yeah.
groups singing there, so.
But are they asking?
But are they panhandling?
No, they're not.
That's the
They're
difference.
entertaining, informally entertaining people.
I mean, you have certain authority to stop nuisances from occurring.
And that would be
And, you know, but I will tell you that towns all over are getting hot water with how those ordinances are crafted in terms of what falls into the category of you know, so, sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over words here, but as an example, Cub Scout in front of Walmart
Or Girl
asking for
Scouts,
donations
yeah.
could legally be considered the same thing as a homeless guy asking for a donation. And so there are, you get into some First Amendment issues about being content neutral with what your ordinances are. It's a long way of saying I think you ultimately could craft something that would be fine. I would just need to spend a little time with it. If that's a direction you wanted to go.
Oh, but I don't know that's a direction we'll want to proceed in at this point. I think as long as we know that the commercial entities within the community don't want them there, then we can just address it that way.
And we do have a no solicitation ordinance to cover you at your house.
Yes.
And on that, what I was thinking of is do something like a public service announcement on the website, like we did, like, hey, if you see a road problem, call this number, say, hey, are you aware that solicitation is not allowed in the village of Wesley Chapel? Someone knocks on your door, call the deputy, type of thing. So that people are more aware of it, that way whenever somebody knocks on the door, yeah, or less, and somebody knocks on the door, and more people would do what Mike does, which is like, get out of here, you're supposed to do this. Because I think a lot of people don't realize it. Okay, we can bring it up. Yeah, just like a public service announcement on the website kind of thing.
Do you want me to post that?
You like that, I don't care. I was just.
Well, typically Deb, when Deb posts something, Tammy posts it on Instagram, Deb does Facebook, and Cheryl does the Sunshine List. It's like a coordinated effort.
And, yeah, usually I start it and it goes to them so that we keep a town record, yeah.
I just feel like the more, I just suspect 99% of the people in the village do not know there's a no solicitation ordinance, and that they can get help if they don't like it.
So you good, David? Alright. So update on the USPS collection box. They did not respond to Cheryl's email. She did follow up with a letter. We will come back to you if she hears any response. She did post on a list there to get some advice and help from other towns. And basically, I think it was, one of the quotes was, trying to get the post office was like basically like sticking needles in your eye. So.
I didn't start the conversation, but it was totally hilarious and made me feel much less alone. You would not believe how many counties, towns, big towns, little towns have a problem and how disgusted they all are with the post office. It was funny at times and sad at other times.
So we'll keep you apprised if anything comes about that. The interlocal agreement, I'm not asking y'all to approve it tonight. Y'all saw the feedback we gave to the town, to the county. There will be a county and municipality municipality water sewer meeting on Thursday, March 11th at 9 a.m. We have not gotten a formal invitation yet, but Richard Helms told me about what's coming, so as soon as we hear anything official at the Ag Center, so everyone will be invited. I think it was like 9 to 12 or something like that. But we did send back our feedback and our concerns about signing that agreement. We were not different. Weddington, Marvin, everybody basically said the same thing except for Michelle Spring. So I'll keep you posted on that, but I assume we'll hear back from that.
Yeah.
Probably at the meeting. The Western Municipal Alliance update, we pulled this for my request. It's the resolution against 310 unit apartment complexes. Just so residents will know in the future, all the other municipalities have been very kind in passing resolutions to support busing against our high density. So you might see things start to pop up on our consent agenda where we are supporting our municipality neighbors in signing resolutions against their high density subdivisions, and this is one of them. So I would like to make a motion that we pass that resolution. Do I have a second? Any discussion?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have a problem with being on the consent agenda. I just thought it was important that the rest of the council members had a chance to say whether they want this typically on consent, or do they just pencil with it, or do you want to discuss every time we send out a resolution? Okay, I just wanted to make sure we all agreed on that before we did the first.
I just have this on the consent agenda, doesn't mean we're not supposed to look at it.
Well, a resolution like that is kind of a big deal. I just want to make sure you get a chance to say your piece on something one way or the other. I think it may be future council members.
So everybody in favor? Alright. So number 21, trying to get us counting. So consider amendment to the personnel policy to change method of approval of PTO. So, say for example, a part-time employee was scheduled to work 30 hours. They did not, they were 28, and more than once, or they worked 29. We are paying them at 30 hours a week regardless of what they work. So they are kind of getting a little bit of an unfair advantage. So we are asking that it be changed to their calculation for paid time off is based on the number of hours that they work. Did you talk to Cheryl Brown? No. To Cheryl Brown, who wrote. We talked about this when we did the rules. And I said that we would ask the employee to always work those 30 hours or to claim their sick time or their vacation time. But they have not wanted to do that or chosen to do that even when we've asked. So it's just a simple change to calculate it based on their hours worked. And so like for example, when Amy was out with COVID, she did not work 30 hours, and I told her that in the future, because we would still have that time banked in her line item, say she has a Parks and Rec meeting and it goes over 2 hours, she would still be able to work. Maybe that week she might be working 32 hours because there's still that time available in her line item. But so then she would be accruing 30 hours of vacation from the week she worked 28, and then in the week it would even out when she does the week that she works 30, but there might be a case that she hasn't, like she's still in the hole probably 6 hours, 9 hours.
She doesn't like to take leave time.
And I don't know why we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal to me if she takes it or not, but it does seem unfair to other employees if we're calculating it.
To me, there's a couple of issues in this. One is job expectations and time on the job, right? It's that, is it a 30-hour-a-week job? Or is it somewhere about 30 hours a week, but we're really flexible because we don't have a lot to do. I do think that's part of the calculus, because if you were to say there's somebody with 40 hours and they're then saying, oh, well, I don't want to take my leave and I don't want to do this, we would say, no, you know, with this employee in this particular situation, make this work, but what precedent is it setting for the future? You know, that it's not employment at the employee's convenience.
And you know, we hired Amy with the assumption that she would be spending all this extra time that she is not having to spend on the call, right? So, you know, we kind of have not filled her days. But I guess when we come to our budget, and you know, when we interviewed for this position, we said it was a 1 year, you know, so this is a budget conversation down the road that we'll be having about the position. But this is just what came up.
No, I get that it's unfair, and like I said, I think the right approach is the way it's written. I think the way it's being, this particular employee doesn't want to take their leave is what's putting the kink in.
So would you rather make it mandatory that she has to use her leave for the 30 hours?
I mean, because when we changed the policy, I mean, she's effectively getting more. So I'm not understanding her reluctance.
She likes to keep like a week. I don't know. Like, I don't know. My own counsel is not. She can be forced into taking 30 hours a week, or she can be taking 30 hours a week. We can do it based on her own.
It just feels to me like we're having to do, because what I remember Cheryl talking about was that you do it on the hour schedule, because they're supposed to be working those hours. And therefore it's simpler, it's more straightforward, it's what you can count on, you can estimate it, blah, blah, blah. But this way, it's always changing. You did 28, you did 29, you did 31, you know, it's just a burden, frankly, to the clerk doing payroll.
Whereas if we said, we're just taking 30 only, you need to work 30.
Or take your leave.
Or take your leave.
And she has plenty of time. She has plenty of
I
time.
don't care, y'all tell me more.
I just am conscious of precedents of future employees, and we're actively trying to hire somebody.
That where you leave?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if we're expecting 30 hours, we get 30 hours, and anything else just complicates it.
Or we go in and we say, we don't need your 24.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll bring that up in our budget conversation, and I will make sure that her time sheets reflect 30 hours from here on out. All right, so now a closed session for NCG.
Point of order, can we switch council comments to being the next item and then kick out John and John and do our closed session right here?
Can we change the order?
Yeah, I'd go for it, sure.
He just wants to go forward. All right, so let them go with the council comments, but let's keep them quick, guys, okay? I'll go first. The community development block grant update, I attended a phone call. It was actually really interesting, the stuff that they do and do or don't do. Basically, it would be Western Chapel just coming to the table to participate, kind of like Weddington does. We would have to like pass a resolution or a form that that Patrick hasn't gotten to us yet. And he is happy to come and talk. But I did find out that there are Wesley Chapel residents who have benefited from some of the programs that this grant does. And some of that was meal delivery during the pandemic, or I guess maybe senior meal delivery. He didn't have like the latest numbers, but we do have residents who have benefited from this type of programming. And by us participating, it would allow someone who maybe needed something to apply for funds, depending on their priorities that they identify, whether it's housing, updates, or...
Does that mean the funds are going to run through our village?
No, they would apply to the grant specifically, and so we wouldn't have to deal with the headache. It would really be more like coming to the table to work together for the betterment of Humboldt County, and the resident would apply directly to, unless the town had a project or something they wanted to apply for the funds. So we'll have more information
Now, how did they know that the people lived in Wesley Chapel?
I don't know, but he pulled.
People never know where they live.
That's true. I guess he did the addresses, but he was gonna try to find me like more recent numbers. So, who knows who knows?
The main reason I asked John today was I wanted to give him an update of council comments on what the county's doing. Got a call from David Williams this afternoon to tell me specifically two things. One, to let us know that it looks like we have the votes we need for the EPCON vote, that the project is going to get denied.
What was he going to settle?
Based on his conversations with his fellow council members, his fellow Board of County Commissioners. So it looks like he's got at least 3 votes, possibly more, to kill the EPCON project going in on Billy Howie. He said that their conversations after the fact were specifically that exactly what we talked about was, one, they were only parading real estate agents through the public comments or employees, that there wasn't really, they saw right through the fact that the guy holding up a handful of letters from residents from Wesley Oaks trying to give the positive spin on the Wesley Oaks subdivision, they saw right through that. And the one I wanted John to be aware of, David also informed me that the county commissioners are considering changing the UDO so that it's more consistent with the municipalities as far as planning and zoning commission, that floodplains and will not be included in the density calculations for overall densities of subdivisions. And right now, I guess they do include it, but now that starting next month, they will not. So that's a significant change.
Yeah, that would have 600,000.
Exactly. The other thing I want to update everybody on is I did go to the public meeting at Five Stones. There was no really new information. It was not as well attended as the last one that we went to, but they're moving forward on that. There was some pushback from some of the neighbors on traffic, and the one thing that really kind of jumped out at me is that the DOTs were going to require that they do a road improvement at the corner of Cuthbertson Road and Newtown Road as a condition of them potentially putting in a school. In addition to that, a little further down the road, closer toward Lowe's grocery store, past the Lawson subdivision, which is considered, I guess, Waxhaw, they're considering putting in a subdivision there as well, just off to the right, before you get the hardware store. They're asking that if that parcel is developed, that they do an improvement at the corner of Waxhaw, or between at the corner of Cuthbertson and Newtown Road. So,
What?
every
Right,
but they're saying it's going to be on.
They need the intersection at Cuthbertson and
They said that they would have to improve there. So it looks like there's a bunch of different.
And I'm afraid that's out here on Water Road, you're kind of wrong.
I'm just saying that, I thought we had on our list of projects a roundabout
I think there's supposed to be something there.
as well.
No, it's a roundabout at West Indian Trail and Newtown, but I thought there was some sort of intersection improvement at Cuthbertson.
Right, but they're saying that Waxhaw is requesting that a developer do it for development closer to Lowe's, that the DOT is requesting that the Southwell Church do it as a condition of potentially getting their school approved, and I think we wanted it approved at the same time. It was one of our, I think, top 5 intersections that potentially needed improvements. So
Yeah, I thought it was on some list for an intersection.
right, I thought it was for a roundabout.
I don't recall it.
No, they were talking about potentially making that a condition. Either 1 or 2 potential new subdivisions on Cuthbertson. So, that was something I didn't know before going to that public meeting. On the Skip Farm, Sheriff's deputies, when we talked about that, I think we talked about budgets. And last but not least, sign sweeps that we've been doing or maybe not doing in town. Would anybody feel comfortable if instead of going out and collecting all the signs, we just said, hey, you put up an illegal sign, you got your phone number on there, I call you up and tell you you've got 3 days to take it down, or we send you a fine.
What's the legality of that, John?
I'm sorry, I was trying to read something about
Right now, we have a problem with a lot of illegal signs being put up at intersections. You know, we buy houses, we buy junk cars, that kind of stuff. And we go out about once a month and pull down all the illegal signs. The idea was instead of spending our time and energy going out and taking the signs down, just writing down the phone number that's on the illegal sign and says, look, you've got 3 days to take the sign down, or we're going to send you a fine. That way we don't have to physically go out there and remove the signs.
Or do we pull them down and send them a letter and say, don't put them back out?
How do you send a fine to a phone number?
Well, and I don't think you'd have to have, the ordinance would have to provide that you have the authority to do that. You can't just do it. So you'd have to amend the ordinance. And I don't know what the revised 160D has in terms of its enforcement mechanisms for signs, stuff like that. There may be something built into that, but regardless, you would have to have ordinance authority to be able to issue a fine.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to figure, right now the way we do it is, you just literally pull off the road, you jump out of your car, you pick up 5 or 6 signs at an intersection that are there illegally, you throw them in the back of the truck and you're on the way. But they just always seem to come back. I'd like to figure out a way to let people know that, hey, we're going to start fining them if you keep putting these signs up instead of it reoccurring. The long-term goal here is obviously keep the reoccurring signs from coming back.
If we can't handle a code violation, I don't see how we're going to get I sell houses to pay us a fine, you know.
Some of the sign guys are getting smart. They'll come out with an 8-foot ladder and they'll put it 8 foot, 10 feet up in the air. So you can't just drive by and pick up the sign. You've got to walk out there with a ladder, which is what I've got to do at the corner of Newtown Road and Waxhaw Trail Road.
Which I did do, like, it was okay before that.
But isn't there a law that you're not supposed to post signs on utility poles or?
Who's enforcing it?
I don't know, it seems like it's not on utility poles or street signs, that the county should enforce it.
Maybe somebody should call the power company and see what they do about signs on utility poles.
Well, they always seem to disappear after a time, but they always seem to be up there way too long. I mean, I think it really makes our community go traction. So I'd like to come up with a solution sometime in the future to figure out how to.
What if you call them to see what they do, so our policy doesn't
It's just, that's my little rant. There's a bunch of illegal signs and I'd like to figure out a way to take care of it.
Who wants to go next?
So at the last council meeting, we had a conversation about McCoy Farms, and council made the decision to not require the stub road. And that property where the stub road would eventually connect it through to King's Grant is for sale. And on the sale ad, it says subdividable, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 square feet. So one of my questions is, was the planning board aware that that property was available, and how do we make sure was for sale? And how do we make sure that when things like that happen, we have, the reason that woman came here and was saying push the other property is she knew it was for sale. And so that would be the new owner's problem. So now we gave up a potential connectivity through subdivisions because they sell it, they're going to come in and want to put in a small subdivision. And we would have lost our connectivity through there, and she's going to end up with a subdivision around her instead. So it's just more of a comment of, yes, it's great to listen to people and everything else, but we also need to find out a way to make sure we have all the relevant information. So that we're not blindsided.
Lord, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there also connectivity through the main road and through the subdivision on the other side?
It was the stub road that we took out.
Right.
And that stub road, that property that would have run across her property and that Jason property, that property's got that weird thing, is for sale.
Right.
And so that if it sells and subdivision goes in, we will have lost the opportunity for connectivity between 3 neighborhoods, which was part of our approach that we said we wanted to have. Just making everybody aware that we somehow need to do a better job of figuring out how to make sure we're fully aware of all pertinent information.
We have 3 services we provide as a village: planning and zoning. We get a lot of information from every month, and John and his team put a lot of hours into that. Parks and Rec, which John and all the Parks and Rec committee members put a lot of time into every month. And deputy service, to which the feedback that we receive is 1 report, 1 time a month. To me, that does not give me a lot of information on if there's repeat crimes, if there's pertinent crimes, if there's pockets of crimes that are taking place in the village that we need to address. Just hearing the deputies talk tonight about the response times, I think we need to be more proactive as a council and gain as much information as we can from the deputy that we're paying to give us a more thorough report and spend time with us. Maybe not every month, but at least 1, 2, maybe 3 times a year, so that we know what's going on with that patrol work.
Well, he was coming every month, and we said we wanted his time spent quarterly. And he was coming quarterly, but when the pandemic hit, and we were trying not to get so many people in the room, I told him he didn't have to come every month. Now, I can tell him we would like him to resume his quarterly meetings.
But
It sounds like David's asking for
he says for information.
different type of information.
Different type of information, but also face to face, so that we can dig into that information maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, because most of his reports, even when he was at face to face, were pretty dry.
Yeah, he said, oh yeah, people love to keep them on.
Yeah.
Just think about, you have to be very specific for him, not exactly what you want to hear. And I can ask him to start coming to that quarterly.
I mean, like if there's a particular type of crime or incident, like you mentioned location, like you say, if you get something and within proximity, maybe something more specific like that we ask him for.
You just let me know and I'll.
Do you want him at the next meeting or no?
I would like that, yes.
I don't know, I don't already have a schedule. That might be the only thing.
I think he'd probably be okay. I don't think he has March yet. But I mean, he was offering to come to like February, I think, so.
I did reach out to several deputies after knowing that Sheriff Kathy was coming. And that was one of the questions that the deputies that I spoke to had. How often do you see Brandon? I've been on council for a year. I've never seen Brandon. I don't even know what Brandon looks like. And they were like, well, you know, that needs to be something you guys look at.
And I think maybe the sheriff gave a different directive to Brandon than what he's had in the past, because the number of incidences on his reports were at the high 400s, maybe the real low 500s, and in the last month they went up to 740 something. So the number of notable incidences, I mean, I've seen him running speed traps, and I've seen him doing more things in the community than I ever have before, but only in the last 30 days. So
We'll see what happens in the next term.
exactly. Typically, and I looked at his reports, I mean, it's typically last 90 days. Like I said, it's always been 500 or under 500. Now it's well over 700, and I think he may have been pushed a little bit to be out there a lot.
I do see him pretty frequently. I ran into him the other day. I probably ran into him, now not maybe months, he was gone a couple months last.
He was gone like a month. He had surgery and all. He was out for a while.
I've seen him at the park. He'll be at that random little building, if you're going toward, like that cut through to,
Southern Whimsy?
no, he'll be at Southern Whimsy a lot, he'll be at Sidearm Lot, he'll be in the shopping centers a lot, but I've seen him, it's a cut through if you're going to Newtown, if you're going to Cuthbertson, what is that? That little,
Will Plyler. Will Plyler.
The new power line thing.
Yeah, Will Plyler.
Will Plyler. He'll sit there and give people tickets a lot.
There's Billy Howard, who was one of the radar last week.
He's got a lot of road out there by subdivision there in that little dip or that hill, he's like, oh. I mean, the jump truck's blocked.
But if you let me know, I'll get it. So, thank you to people who were gonna ask for you.
Motion to kick John and John out.
Thank you for hanging out. John, I'm glad to see you're gonna put you at the front of the meeting next month, okay?
Sorry?
I'm gonna move you to the front of the meeting next month. So I am gonna call, I'm gonna make a motion, we go into closed session for ACGS 143-318.130 for attorney-client privilege.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. George?